President defeating Vice President Kamala Harris.
We are projecting at this hour the 47th President of the United States, Donald Trump, will be elected to return to the White House.
This is an incredible moment in American history for Donald Trump.
NBC News, ABC News, and CNN have all called Pennsylvania for Donald Trump. This election is over.
So many of us wish this hadn't happened.
I know it's painful to talk about.
I mean, I've spent most of the morning crying.
I have to move, I'm pretty sure.
I no longer have faith in who we think we are. I'm horrified by the fact that my fellow Americans chose a felon, a rapist, and an insurrectionist.
I wake up and I just see Orange is back.
Kick to the body by John.
Not responsible for the views, actions, statements, or opinions of its guests, advertisers, or even its viewers. The information contained in this program is not to be confused with medical or legal advice. An appearance on this platform is not necessarily an endorsement, but as always, we encourage you to do your own research. Enjoy the show. Well, good evening, everyone. And of course, welcome back. Yes, my friends, to another very exciting episode of Red Pill News Live. Be happy. I don't know what the deal is. Like, I was trying to search for some of my own videos yesterday. Videos where I knew I had the keyword I was looking for in the title, in the description, in the tags on the video, and I even used my own channel name, and my video on that subject would not come up. So I don't know what the hell is going on. I emailed Rumble and I said, am I missing something? Am I doing something wrong because people are telling me they can't find me? It's crazy. So, but they're featuring Asmongold. Like, Asmongold, people already know where Asmongold is. People know that Asmongold's live. They're going to be finding him in the quartering. God. Cut me some slack, Rumble. I'd really appreciate it, guys. All right. So, anyways, we got a lot to discuss today. Lisa just left town. I'm here alone with the dog. So, if something comes up, I might need to take them outside. I've given them their medicine. Hopefully everything's going to be good. So if you do me a favor, please hit that like button. Please help us out by sharing the show. And get ready, because we've got a lot to talk about. So sit back, relax, and grab your popcorn, because we're going to be right back after this. So new inflation numbers are out of Washington, and it shows that once again, inflation is on the rise. That's another threat to you, another threat to your savings account, and of course, also your retirement. So you got to ask yourself an honest question here. Does your dollar go as far today as it did 10 years ago? Well, what about 5 years ago, even last year? Then what does the next decade look like for you and your savings? Because if your portfolio lacks exposure to gold, one of history's most reliable economic hedges, it's about time to rethink your strategy, because gold has kept up with inflation, and in many periods, it's actually outpaced it. My friends at Noble Gold Investments specialize in helping people protect their wealth using physical gold and silver. Whether you're going to roll over an IRA or make a direct purchase, their team walks you through the entire process, and they make it super simple. There's no pressure, just education and experience. And right now, all new qualified accounts are going to receive a free 1/10 of an ounce America Gold Eagle as a thank you. To find out, you can visit noblegoldinvestments.com/redpill78 and discover just how easy it is to protect your financial future. Once again, that's noblegoldinvestments.com/redpill78. And when you support my sponsors, you support this channel. All right, gang. Oh, that's the wrong button. Here we are. I'm doing an experiment. I am changing it because there are different ways that you can categorize your shows. And I was just looking here on the front page, and they don't have like a heading for podcasts and politics. So I changed. Yeah, see, okay, they do have podcasts here. Let's see if they've got. And I'm not listed on the podcast page. Let me go to the news and see if I'm listed under news. News, politics. Yeah, so they've got me under news. All right. Okay, well, you go to news, and then that actually brings you to more categories. So I guess I'm going to have to do news and politics. We'll see how that works out. All right, well, let me get into all of our stories today. Appreciate Trump won over there on Pilled. Thank you very much for those gold pills. And let's first check in with Capitol Hill. We're going to see here. So apparently Pam Bondi and Todd Blanche, Harmeet Dillon, the DOJ, had gone down to Capitol Hill to apparently prepare some type of a presentation. The Democrats allegedly got super upset because this was a closed-door briefing. Closed door means that there are no cameras, there's no audience. And for some reason, they got really upset and they shut the entire thing down because there was no cameras that were present. And as far as I know, they're never present in a situation like this. So it seems that whatever was being presented, the Democrats simply just didn't want to hear it. So I think that this might have had something to do in preparation for the upcoming testimony that Pam Bondi and Todd Blanche and others are going to be delivering on April 14th, which is, of course, in relation to the handling of the Epstein files and their compliance with the Epstein Transparency Act. So they were looking to do a briefing to see where they were up until that point. And for some reason, it just became a total circus sideshow. Let's go ahead and hear from Bondi herself, and we'll see what was going on. Let me just get past this commercial. Ted Cruz has his own podcast now, I guess. Ted Cruz has his own podcast. Interesting. Everybody's a podcaster now. Okay, here we go.
Identified to us, we fix them immediately.
And let me be clear on this case. This case has spanned multiple administrations. It started under Bush. It went to Obama. It went to Biden. We were the only, no documents were released, only under the Trump administration. And we released 3 million documents, had 500 attorneys working on that, complying with the law the best we could, and protecting victims in doing it.
Madam Attorney General, this
Go ahead.
has been quite an odyssey for you. This began with an encounter you had with some activists in the Roosevelt Room where you handed out some binders. Then there was a discussion, a statement that the FBI and DOJ put out that this investigation was over. Flash ahead to a couple of weeks ago, you had a very unusual appearance before the House Judiciary Committee. Do you have any regrets? Is there anything you might have done differently? And do you think that your comportment and the department's comportment in this have exacerbated the public's lack of trust in this process?
Well, let me repeat what I just said. This has spanned 4 administrations. Bush, Obama, well, Trump won, 45, where Jeffrey Epstein was prosecuted, and then Joe Biden's administration, where 0 documents were provided. We have provided 3 million documents. 3 million documents, the height of the Eiffel Tower, used 500 attorneys working around the clock, have identified, either they self-identified or through their attorneys, 1,200 victims who we did our very, very best to protect their identities. And so we're proud of the work that we've done on this. Go ahead. Next question.
Democrats in the committee walked out. They called it a, quote, fake hearing and said you were just trying to get around appearing for a deposition. Can you respond to those?
Sure. We were there to answer questions. It's the evening. We came at their convenience. We gave them really as much time as they wanted. And one congresswoman screamed C-SPAN wasn't in there, so she didn't want to ask questions. Yet all day long they've been on social media saying they had all these questions. We sat there saying, anything you want to ask us, anything you want to ask us. And they screamed C-SPAN wasn't there, one of them, and then they stormed out of the meeting. So can you just thank you all.
The whole thing is a circus sideshow. I do want to say this. I think for all of the criticism that the current DOJ and Bondi get, they are undeserving of it. Like, if it wasn't for this administration and this particular DOJ, we would have none of these documents. None of these people would have been exposed. There would be nothing for us to look at. And I understand that people thought maybe it was going to be in a different form, or it was going to look like something else, or it was going to say something else. But considering the number of administrations that had these documents in their possession over the course of the years, I think we're damn lucky that we've gotten what we have. And there is nothing to say that there won't be additional documents that get released in the future, because I firmly believe that there is probably a lot more that's been hidden. I think there's probably even more that's being destroyed over the years. So what I'm really concerned about is ensuring that what can be proven from what we have right now is followed up on. If there is nothing else that comes from the Epstein files other than these series of massive releases, I will definitely be disappointed. I will be seriously disappointed. However, I think that there will be more that comes from it, and I think that likely it will be folded into a series of additional investigations. Now, let's hear this video from Congressman Yasmin Ansari. I've never heard of this woman either, but she, I guess, was part of the group that stormed out of this meeting. First of all, Harmeet Dillon says, I was sitting behind Bondi at this briefing where she answered every question asked by every side. This lady picked up her purse and walked out without asking a single question. So much for getting answers. These people are not serious. What they claim they want is not really what they want. The only thing they want is to create this faux outrage among the public, and they want to project the perception that nothing has happened, or that what has happened is not worth anybody's time, even though it's exactly what they wanted. For them, they wanted something damning on Donald Trump, and that simply didn't exist in those files. Wow. Media cannot be played. Wonder why that is. Well, hold on just a second. Let me see if I can successfully get this to play somewhere else.
Home from the most insane bullshit that Attorney General Pam Bondi and Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche tried to pull.
How old is this girl? She's like 22 or something like that.
So I want to tell you guys what happened. So as a reminder, last week, the Oversight Committee on a bipartisan basis issued a subpoena for Pam Bondi to come forward and take part in a deposition.
Which she is. It's not scheduled until next month on the 14th.
As you know, we've had many depositions. The Clintons were deposed. Les Wexner, Jeffrey Epstein's financier, has been deposed. I traveled to Ohio for that. We've had Epstein's accountants deposed. There are many people that are being deposed as part of this investigation. And given Pam Bondi's refusal to release the entirety of the files and all of the other things she's done as part of this cover-up.
Okay, so now, in terms of that as a statement, what are they alleging has not been released? Because I haven't heard anyone point to anything specific. And every time I see a rage bait tweet suggesting that a file is, no longer there, or it's being removed, there is an explanation like, okay, there was like a person who needed to be redacted from it, or it had personal information, or it's back. Or I've even seen the Democrats suggesting that a file is not present, and then the DOJ will respond and be like, are you a moron? It's right here. You can go straight to it. I even saw Ron Wyden the other day suggesting that Todd Blanche was refusing to comply with information related to the DEA investigation that we went over here on this show. They released a huge portion of that information, a big, long, multi-page document, and Ron Wyden said that Todd Blanche was refusing to hand over that document. And Todd Blanche was like, it was in the files. Like, it was there from the very beginning. If you want to see the unredacted version, you have to come in and then we can show it to you. So it's pretty ridiculous.
She was deposed. So suddenly yesterday, we get notified by Chairman Comer that there's going to be this briefing by Bondi and Blanche with no information about what that means. Truly, like we didn't even know the format. A few hours prior, we found out we'd be able to ask questions. So we show up, and it becomes very clear quickly that this entire fake hearing we had, the intention of it is so that she doesn't have to come and be under oath as part of a deposition. To paint the picture, we were in the committee room.
Anyways, I think that the whole thing is bullshit. And I think that they're just literally trying to cast shade. There is nothing to indicate that they're not going to show up to testify under the deposition, under oath. And obviously, it's several weeks out. So for them to say that that's not going to happen, they don't have any knowledge about what's actually going to take place. What I can tell you has just been announced is that as part of the grand conspiracy grand jury taking place right now down in Florida, James Comey has just been subpoenaed, and he will need to appear himself before a grand jury. Now, this is particularly notable because the biggest name we've had thus far as being a subject of this investigation was former CIA Director John Brennan. Now, of course, former FBI Director James Comey was another one of those people present in those early meetings inside the Obama White House, plotting the takedown of President Trump before he came on as president. And of course, James Comey worked behind the scenes even after President Trump became president to try to sabotage his administration. We have no idea what the DOJ is going to be asking for, but I would imagine that this is probably going to be an exhaustive investigation because Florida is a very different beast than the Eastern District of Virginia or the District of Columbia.
It has been coming into focus since we've been on the air. The former director of the FBI, Jim Comey, has reportedly been subpoenaed in that wide-ranging grand conspiracy case that they're trying to assemble against anyone who ever investigated and sought to prosecute Donald Trump. We'll get to that. It has been
good. It's been a long time coming. I knew that this was going to happen. I was just waiting for it to happen. And I'm glad to see that it finally is. So I will say you can expect every single one of those people who was in the Obama Oval Office to also be subpoenaed. But the fact that it's taken them from the beginning of the year to get to the subpoena of James Comey, that means that the last 2.5 months, they've taken the information that they were able to squeeze out of John Brennan, and they've been investigating, cross-referencing, and deciding the best way to go about asking James Comey his questions. Now, James Comey doesn't know what John Brennan was asked. He doesn't know what John Brennan gave up. Of course, I'm certain they are probably going to have some form of a conversation. But when you're looking at a set of time as long as they've had, it means that it's going to be much more difficult for James Comey to cover up whatever it was that his criminal actions were. And of course, there is a whole host of documents and operations that have been discovered in the interim, which James Comey never admitted to actually having taken part in, or information that he had covered up, or misspellings on documents, or the secret filing of documents. There's just a lot of criminal activity that James Comey is likely going to be asked to explain. So Florida is the key. Florida is the key to this whole thing. And another aspect of this, as you all know, RICO, racketeering, has no statute of limitations. It goes from the beginning, the outset of the criminal conspiracy, until the most recent action that was designed to obscure that criminal activity. So that goes from 2015 all the way now to 2026, because James Comey and all of those criminal actors within the Obama administration have undoubtedly been communicating and working on this behind the scenes. So let's go. All right. Now, this is a very interesting post that I saw earlier today, And it's in reference to a new action that President Trump actually quietly announced last week. Now, I don't know this person. Never followed them before, never seen anything they've said. But I'm just going to read you the content of it because it's relevant to a number of things that I think, we've talked about here in this program. And probably anybody who's been online in the last decade has most likely really noticed. There is a lot of covert foreign influence that we see in social media. Over the last couple of days, we've talked about some efforts specifically by the Chinese Communist Party and some of their covert military and intelligence teams that were working throughout the 2016, 2020, and most likely even the 2024 election to sow division online, to inject narratives into the public conversation. And then I also want you to think about the 7,000 Club, okay? Because that's something that's happened very recently. So he says, his name is Restitutor. He says, a warning to those operating in foreign malign influence networks throughout alternative media. Now, obviously, this is relevant to me because I operate in the alternative media sphere. New dedicated law enforcement and counterintelligence units are being stood up specifically to address foreign influence operations conducted through domestic media ecosystems. This is not speculative. The institutional infrastructure to prosecute these cases is being built right now. If you were approached, if someone helped you set up your podcast, your show, your platform, if you were introduced to other people in a network you didn't fully understand, if you received direction on narratives to push, if you were compensated, whether through direct payment, audience growth services, production support, sponsorship arrangements, or access to guests and bookers you had no business reaching on your own, the time to get ahead of this is now. FARA violations carry up to 5 years in prison. Sanctions evasion carries up to 20. Conspiracy charges compound, and the digital trail you left behind is not going away. Counterintelligence investigations do not start with the person at the top. They start with the outer ring, the amplifiers, the second-tier nodes, the people who thought they were too small to matter, and you are not too small to matter. You are the starting point. Now, the order that I'm discussing here is President Trump's cyber strategy for America, just released this month. Now, President Trump says over the past year, the United States has shown the entire world that we have the most powerful, sophisticated, and technologically advanced military on Earth, and it's not even close. This includes not only our overwhelming conventional military strength, but also our unparalleled non-kinetic powers. The National Cyber Strategy outlines my priorities for ensuring that America remains unrivaled in cyberspace. It calls for unprecedented coordination across governments and the private sector to invest in the best technologies and continue world-class innovation, and to make the most of America's cyber capabilities for both offensive and defensive missions. Our cyber tools and operators are the best in the world, and we are empowering them to defend America by disrupting and disorienting our adversaries and denying them a safe haven. The United States has capabilities that the rest of the world can only begin to imagine. Our warriors in cyberspace are working every day to ensure that anyone who would seek to harm America will pay the steepest and most terrible price. This strategy is about defending the safety, security, and prosperity of the American people. As we approach the 250th anniversary of American independence, the strategy laid out in this document will help ensure that America remains the strongest, freest, and greatest country in the history of the world long into the future. American power will finally stand up in cyberspace. Buffering, you guys are saying it's buffering. It's looking like it's totally cool to me. If anybody else can confirm that you're getting a good signal or not, that would be awesome. While I'm waiting for people to confirm 5x5 in the chat, I will say thank you very much to Sean Joe for the can and the cookie and another cookie. Also, thank you to FilterDog1, who says FBI investigation found Kent leaked details from classified server to a member of the media and other leaks to Tucker. We are going to be talking about Joe Kent here in just a minute. All right. So anyways, the cybersecurity strategy is something that comes out, every single year. But we're in a different time right now. In the 21st century, what happens online is almost more important than what's happening in the battlefield, because a lot of offensive and defensive capabilities begin in that online space. Now, President Trump goes on to say that cyberspace was born in America. We have this technology and these capabilities that cannot be taken for granted. Unlike other administrations, the Trump administration will not tinker at the edges and apply partial measures, ambiguous strategies. Instead, we are going to use this as a tool, and we are going to leverage it in any way that any way that we can, because certainly our adversaries are doing the exact same thing. Now, goes into a number of pillars. First, using cybersecurity and our tools to shape adversary behavior, promote common sense regulation, modernize and secure federal government networks. You would be surprised in some of these places how old these systems are. Securing critical infrastructure, so election materials, election machines, those are definitely going to be what happened to X. X is still working, R17, and people over on X are saying that it's fine over there. So if it's not working for you, I don't know what the deal is. I am being attacked today for some reason. Critical infrastructure also includes our energy grid and, of course, our water and electrical supplies. Sustaining superiority in critical and emerging technologies, that probably more important than anything right now. And then building talent and capacity. So if you go through and read all of this, it is an interesting read. But right here in the moving forward section, President Trump writes, "Our resolve is absolute. We will act swiftly, deliberately, and proactively to disable cyber threats to America. We will not confine our responses to the cyber realm. We will undertake an unprecedented effort, operating in a coordinated and sustained fashion across the U.S. government, working with allies across the globe. We will promote U.S. interests and security. We will fight the curtailment of free speech. We will outcompete adversaries who sell low-cost AI and digital technologies that carry embedded censorship, surveillance, and ideological bias. We will partner closely with industry and academia at the speed and scale commensurate with the threats we face and in accordance with our values." And then he ends with this. President Trump has made targeting Americans a hazardous business. Our adversaries have and will increasingly feel the consequences of their actions. We will dismantle networks, pursue hackers and spies, sanction lawless foreign hacking companies. We will unveil and embarrass online espionage, destructive propaganda and influence operations, and cultural subversion. So this, I believe, is the crux of the original post that I read to you. Now, I don't know if this gentleman has any more knowledge about this and he's just not saying it specifically, or if he's only drawing his conclusion from this quote from the cybersecurity strategy. But I would suggest that there is a lot of this happening online. It's been taking place for a very long time. And as people have come to find out, a lot of what you see online is totally fake. And it is definitely just created with one thing in mind, and that is to destabilize, to psychologically damage, and to harm the United States of America. Knowing what we know about people being paid to post certain things or to run with certain narratives, if this is something that is happening at the Department of Justice or as a measure that will bring in a number of other government and law enforcement agencies, I'll be very interested to see who gets caught up in this. When the 7,000 Club stuff started coming out, I think that it was Anna Paulina Luna who said, you know, if you are taking a check for $7,000 from the government of a foreign nation to push a particular narrative, you must register as a foreign agent of that country. Now, I've never taken a check from any foreign government. I've never taken a narrative from an outside person to spin on my show. And I have never had anyone decide the narrative or direction of anything that I've said on my program in the many years that I've been doing this. But I am certain that I know people who have. I know that there are people out there who have definitely done this. I've seen people do this online, like suddenly, inexplicably take on a position that they didn't have before, or all of a sudden they are behaving in a certain way. And it's been sort of confusing at the time. But I think that it's something that needs to happen. I mean, freedom of speech is one thing, but there are certain ways that you can behave which fall under the category of behaving as a foreign agent, of taking the narrative of something or someone or an organization or a group or a country and then presenting it as if it's your own original idea. And it's not. Well, Tempanon, just because this is one initiative of many doesn't mean that all of these other things aren't happening either. So Tempanon, just, I don't know, it's the first time I've seen your name, but this is just one thing. This is just one thing. There is a whole of government effort right now to address all of these things. And if you had been here the other day, then you might have heard me talking about the mainstream media preparing to have their broadcast licenses revoked because they do kind of what we were just talking about a moment ago. That in and of itself does not negate the ability of one or more government agencies to address other things that you might want to see done. So none of these things are occurring in a vacuum. There are so many employees in the federal government, so many people working on the Trump team and working to affect the changes that we want to see. You can't possibly know about all of them, and none of them are going to stop any of the others from happening. So please don't get it twisted. We are not seeing anything slow down because President Trump announces this change in the cybersecurity strategy. I merely thought that it was particularly interesting, given the conversation that we've had recently about those $7,000 checks and the fact that actually the government of Israel chose not to pay those influencers, and those people are now suing the government of Israel. So if they did not register as a foreign entity, they have given themselves up as a person who was supposed to receive that $7,000. And they're now going to be under the scrutiny of the federal government, the DOJ, or whomever. All right, now here is a tweet from my friend Hans Mankey. Hans Mankey, he was a guest on the show previously, and he's got a couple of contacts. And in this instance, yesterday, he had posted this information about the Durham investigation. So it would appear that new documents have come to light which show that Kevin Kleinsmith was involved in more deception than what was previously known. So we know that Kevin Kleinsmith altered an email to make it appear as if Carter Page was a Russian spy, when in fact he had previously been an asset of the Central Intelligence Agency. They had asked him to report back on his activities and travels as he was going abroad. But in this newly released document that Chuck Grassley put out the other day, it shows that Kevin Kleinsmith was doing a lot more than just that. He pled guilty to that falsification of the evidence in connection with that FISA warrant, which essentially ruined Carter Page's life and employability, and he's still suing the federal government. But the new information shows that his misconduct was not limited to Carter Page, but it was part of a much broader pattern of actions. Kevin Kleinsmith engaged in a systematic pattern of abuse, and it extended into yet another investigation against a Trump associate. That would be another advisor by the name of Waleed Fariz. Now, Fariz was a scholar of jihadist ideology who had advised both the Romney campaign in 2012 and then again the Trump campaign in 2016. But he hasn't gotten as much attention as Carter Page has. In these newly declassified materials, we see the exact same investigative approach that was used against Carter Page was also used against Mr. Fariz. Now, the document that Grassley revealed shows that Kevin Kleinsmith played, again, a central role in the FISA process, targeting Fariz over these alleged foreign intelligence ties. Now, in the Fariz surveillance, the warrants were repeatedly renewed, even though investigators found time and time again that there was no evidence supporting those allegations, which, of course, makes this incredibly troubling. Because not only is Kevin Kleinsmith apparently a serial perpetrator of this type of behavior, but it points once again to a pattern of government overreach and private citizens having their communications spied upon using the FISA process, which many people are very concerned is about to be renewed. Allegedly, the Trump administration is set to provide a classified briefing to Congress because they allegedly want the FISA process to continue unabated. Now, I would hope that the reason for that is because FISA is currently a tool that is being used against the people who engaged in that grand conspiracy against President Trump and the American people. The reason we know about Kevin Kleinsmith's activity in the ferries investigation is because we had that whistleblower. I spoke about this whistleblower shortly just the other day. But rather than ensuring that the court and the Department of Justice were fully and accurately informed, this newly uncovered report suggests that Kevin Kleinsmith withheld critical exculpatory findings, and it undermined the legal basis for the continued monitoring. When he found out this information, the investigation should have stopped right there. So in this new document, it's an FBI FD 302 from December 2020. It's records that a member of Robert Mueller's special counsel team, after a couple of months into the investigation, it became obvious to him that the ferries investigation did not need to continue. He had been truthful with them, and there was no reason to continue this case. But the whistleblower left, and there was no corroborating evidence to continue, and Kevin Kleinsmith essentially covered it up. Now, Hans Menke put this out. He said, if John Durham or anyone on his team is listening, this is very important. Were you told that Kevin Kleinsmith not only cooked the books in the Carter Page investigation, but he also targeted Waleed Fariz in the exact same corrupt way? Now, of course, the problem would be twofold. If the Durham team learned about it and then did nothing about it, well, then that calls into question the entire Durham investigation and Durham's reputation as a prosecutor. If he wasn't told about it, then obviously that means that someone or some people within the Department of Justice, and perhaps even on John Durham's own team, withheld that information from him in order to shield Kevin Kleinsmith and perhaps cover up the fact that this type of behavior happens or continues to happen within the Department of Justice. Now, Hans has a following. He has people who pay attention. He's an author. He's a political pundit. He's got people that listen to him. And someone from the Durham team or tangential to the Durham team reached out to Hans after that tweet. So this morning they send him a message and he says, I've never spoken with this person before. I don't know them, but I do know that there's someone on the periphery of the Durham investigation. And this person seems to indicate that Durham had no idea that Kevin Kleinsmith had corrupted this Waleed Fariz investigation. So in other words, that entire file likely was concealed from Durham, which is a huge, huge deal. Now, if that's not the case, then obviously John Durham needs to step forward and he needs to say why it was that he chose not to say anything about this, because Kevin Kleinsmith could have just as easily been prosecuted for the Waleed Fariz investigation as he was for the Carter Page investigation. The responsibility of the Department of Justice to hold people accountable within their own ranks, I would suggest, is even more important than the responsibility of the Department of Justice to go after everyday American people. One of the biggest problems that we have in the United States of America, and tell me if you guys disagree, is the fact that we have a two-tiered system of justice. We have justice for us and then just us for them. Okay? They do not seem to ever get in trouble. Kevin Kleinsmith may have been prosecuted, but corrupt Judge James Boasberg essentially gave him a slap on the wrist. They violated Carter Page's privacy, his rights. They essentially set his life on fire because the man was close to President Trump. They completely perverted the FISA process, and they tainted it in the minds of the American people in perpetuity. I think that FISA should absolutely be done away with. Is there something that could be done to allow the U.S. government to listen in on the conversations of people who are not American citizens to ensure that they're keeping us safe? 100%. They could and they should. But they should not be able to take a shit all over the Constitution, listen in on our conversations, and then lie about the findings so that they can continue to do so. Carter Page did nothing wrong. Apparently, Waleed Farees did nothing wrong. But Kevin Kleinsmith sure as shit did. Kevin Kleinsmith has no right to continue practicing as an attorney. And I would suggest that Kevin Kleinsmith was rewarded rather handily for his willingness to once again wipe his ass with the Constitution and destroy the lives of men that he didn't agree with politically. So there needs to be answers on this. We need people to come forward. I want to hear from John Durham. Maybe they will ask John Durham to testify. I did. I said shit. I said shit, Jeremy. So, yes, and Carter Page, maybe he can get John Durham to testify in a civil trial where he's, again, still suing the federal government of the United States. Kevin Kleinsmith should not be practicing law. And the other part of this that's really unfortunate is that the D.C. bar is not going to take away Kevin Kleinsmith's law license. They're not going to punish him at all. They're going to continue to reward him, and they're going to continue to reward people like him. That's another issue entirely. It's a private organization, but they're the ones who pass out these licenses. Maybe there needs to be a different process, and maybe we need to have another investigation. Maybe Kevin Kleinsmith will be brought down for his grand jury summons to the Southern District of Florida. And all of this, all of my problems will be washed away. I don't know, but one can only dream, especially in a world like the one we live in. All right. Thank you very much to Sean Joe for the cookie. Thank you to Moon Baby for, I don't know, another cookie. She says, or they say, thank you for my news, Zach. I appreciate you no matter how much you buffer. Thank you very much. Appreciate you. Thank you to Sean Joe for the cookie as well. All right. Before we get into the conversation on the SAVE Act, I do have a very brief message that I'm about to read you guys right here and now. All right, my friends. So as you are well aware, America's 250th birthday is right around the corner. That is 250 years of freedom, grit, sacrifice, and the greatest experiment in self-governance the world has ever seen. And it is the perfect opportunity to help your kids understand why this country is so amazing. Why does it matter? What are the things that need to be protected? Not just the surface level stuff like fireworks, apple pie, hot dogs, and baseball, the story behind it all. There is a free guide called The Kid's Guide to America's 250th Birthday, and it is truly a great way to introduce your kids to how America began, who the founding fathers were, what they risked, and why those ideas they fought for still matter today. Why we need to continue fighting. This guide will send your kids back to the moment when those brave men signed the Declaration of Independence, knowing full well that they were risking their lives for freedom. It breaks it all down in a way that kids can actually understand and, more importantly, enjoy. It doesn't water it down or turn it into boring schoolwork. So if you care about raising kids who know where this country came from and why it's worth preserving and why they should fight for it, this is something that you're going to want to grab. The best part, it is totally free. All you do is pay $2 for shipping and handling. So just head to freeusabirthday.com. That's freeusabirthday.com and get the Kid's Guide to America's 250th birthday today, because America's story matters. So make sure that the next generation knows it. You can also use that QR code that you see on screen. Thank you very much to Rumble and America's 250th. All right. Now, with as much pushback as we get on voter ID and securing our elections, one thing that I've always brought up is that in some of the biggest shithole countries, biggest third world nations around the world, they have stronger laws securing their elections than we have here in the United States of America. It's quite clear, and I'm going to show you in a clip from Chuck Schumer, that the only reason they don't want voter ID is because they know illegal aliens are voting. They know dead people are voting. They know that ballots are being harvested, and they know that ballots are just being stuffed because of the bloated voter rolls. And those are used for mass mail-in balloting and just the printing of paper, which is used to secure elections. When you take a look at the voting laws that are in place around the world, in the overwhelming majority of countries, like not even just talking comparable first world nations, at least 176 nations around the world and jurisdictions require a voter ID, require you to prove your citizenship and your identity when you cast a ballot. Most of these countries do not have any type of mail-in voting. There are some that allow very limited domestic mail-in voting. It's restricted to people who are maybe hospitalized, but there are no countries in the United States that allow illegal aliens to vote. In literally every country in the world, except for the United States, you have to be a citizen of that country to cast a ballot. There are a small number of countries who permit long-term residents, not citizens, to vote in, say, local elections under very strict residency conditions. And there are even fewer that allow non-citizen residents to vote in national elections. No country except for the United States allows jurisdictions, states, provinces, or cities to prohibit poll workers from asking for a voter ID so that you can prove your identity. There are no nations that accept ballots days or weeks after an election, regardless of when it was postmarked. If it's not there when they close the polls, then you are SOL. None of these other nations on planet Earth allow ballot harvesting. Very few nations grant birthright citizenship. Maybe 33 countries in the entire planet. And most of them require at least one parent to be a citizen or permanent resident at the time of the birth of that child for that child to get that birthright citizenship. Many also restrict passing nationalized citizenship to children if both parents are non-nationals. And according to the International Institute for Democracy and Electoral Assistance, 34 countries or territories allow any type of mail-in voting. And of those 34, 12 allow all voters to vote by mail, while 22 of them permit some voters to vote by mail. And over 100 countries allow some form of out-of-country postal voting, but the restrictions vary specifically where you are and what country you're from. There are a lot of countries that have banned or restricted mail-in voting, and the reason they've done that is because they came to learn very quickly that fraud is super easy to commit when you have mass mail-in voting. France is one that comes up quite often. President Trump loves to mention France, the birthplace of revolution. They banned their mail-in voting in country in 1975. Mexico, our closest neighbor to the south, they banned it in 1991, and then they partially restored it under very strict conditions in 2006. Belgium, a Western European country, they banned domestic mail-in voting in 2018. Of course, they are a very small nation, so if you can't get to the polls in Belgium, then I don't know what your problem is. Russia does not allow mail-in voting for citizens if they're abroad or if they're residents. Sweden and Italy do not permit mail-in voting, and Italy is just in the process of getting rid of their birthright citizenship request. So like if you have parents that are Italian and you're born in the United States, until very recently, you would have just been able to automatically be granted Italian citizenship. They're getting rid of that. In the Ukraine, where there's a freaking war, they don't permit any kind of mail-in voting. Canada, our neighbor to the north, the UK, Switzerland, they require application or registration before you can receive a mail-in ballot. None of those countries that has any form of it will just automatically print ballots and send them to your last known address. Switzerland mails ballots to all registered voters, but they require a voter ID and a polling card for anybody then who is going to be voting in person. All postal voting, in which all electors receive ballots by post without requesting them, is used in several of our United States and Switzerland. That's it. Outside of those very narrow examples, there are no comparable democratically run nations that routinely mail unsolicited ballots to all registered voters as a standard national practice. You do have 4 countries in this world currently who grant equal voting rights to foreigners in national elections. That would be New Zealand. They were also huge adopters of the jab. Chile, Malawi, and Uruguay. In New Zealand, permanent residents can vote after they get 1 year of residence. Chile allows legally present foreign-born adults to vote after 5 years, and Malawi requires 7 years, and then Uruguay after 8 years. In some countries, they do permit non-citizen voting in limited contexts. Ecuador allows legally present present non-citizens to vote after 5 years. Norway allows foreign nationals to vote in local elections after 3 years of residence. Non-citizens cannot vote in elections or referenda in Finland, Ireland, Belgium, Luxembourg, or Sweden, but they can vote in local elections under very specific circumstances. Out of the 47 nations that comprise Europe, all but one require a government-issued photo ID to vote. And among the 38 member nations of the OECD, 33 require government-issued photo ID when they go to the polls. That requirement spans every continent and nearly every style of government, from the most liberal democratic to the most authoritarian. The 4 OECD member countries that did not require a photo ID would be the United Kingdom, Australia, Japan, and New Zealand. And Japan instead uses barcode-verified voter tickets, while Australia doesn't require any sort of ID. New Zealand also does not require ID for voting, but a New Zealand driver's license, a passport, or a Real Me verified ID is required to enroll online. So you are proving your identity at some point. The United Kingdom has since introduced photo ID requirements for most elections. You've got no other democratic nation that has a system comparable to certain United States, where jurisdictions are actively prohibited from requesting a voter ID, and where ID-free voting is codified as a totally legal protection rather than an administrative default. In California, the law prohibits poll workers from asking for voter ID when you come to vote in person. A Kern County elections official stated it pretty plainly, saying poll workers should never be asking for an ID. Now, Governor Newsom has reinforced this at the state level. They passed California Senate Bill 1174, which prohibits local governments from requiring voters to present identification when they cast ballots at the polls. When Huntington Beach attempted to require ID anyway, a California appeals court ruled that the measure violated state law. In Canada, same-day registration is permitted. Since 2012, voter registration in Chile is automatic. Denmark also allows same-day corrections to voter rolls. Most other democracies do not need same-day registration because they use automatic or compulsory registration systems. In Argentina, Chile, Hungary, Israel, the Netherlands, and elsewhere, voter registration is also automatic, but it's based on government records, such as census counts. So you're not going to automatically register any dead people to vote. And once you're dead, you're automatically going to be removed from the voter rolls. In Germany, all citizens must register their address with local authorities. Anyone turning 18 before an election is automatically added to voter rolls with no separate registration required. Automatic voter registration tied to driver's licensing is primarily something that happens here in America. Most peered-type democracies already register voters through population registers, and they don't have a need for that trigger coming from the Department of Motor Vehicles. The only country, other than the United States, that provides automatic voter registration tied to a driver's license is Canada. If a citizen applies for a driver's license in a new province and then they check a box allowing data sharing, provincial motor vehicle registrars can transfer their information to federal election authorities, automatically updating voter registration without any further action. Ballot harvesting is unique to the United States. That's the process where you gather and then submit completed absentee or mail-in ballots as a third party. We've seen it happen pretty often in the Somali community in Minnesota, and it happens to varying degrees in other states. We've talked about that happening unlawfully in Texas as well. But it occurs in some U.S. states where voting by mail is common, but some states have laws that restrict it. As of July 2020, 26 states allow it by way of specified agents to collect and then submit those ballots for another voter. Other states that allow it, you have to be a family member. You can only actually deliver a certain number of ballots. You can't just go out and get ballots from 100 different people and then drop them off at the same time. And there's no documented peer democracy with a system equivalent to the unrestricted ballot harvesting that we see practiced in California. Most countries that do allow absentee voting require ballots to be returned directly by the person who filled it out by the voter or that strictly defined family member. The vast majority of countries have banned absentee ballots for people living in their country. There are some European countries that allow proxy voting, and the safeguards used to prevent fraud are generally a lot more stringent than the ones that are used for absentee ballots here in the United States. Now, post-election voting, which is what we have in virtually every state where we saw Donald Trump winning the election in 2020 and then suddenly losing it when those mass dumps of ballots came in the middle of the night. In the U.S., you've got 5 states that had a receipt deadline between 1 and 4 days after the election. 7 states and Washington, D.C. had a deadline between 5 and 10 days after the election. 2 states, Illinois and Washington, had a deadline between 14 and 20 days after the election. But every state that accepts ballots after Election Day requires that the ballot carry a postmark on or before Election Day. California accepts mail ballots received up to 22 days after the election, provided they are postmarked on Election Day. In Canada, roughly 99,988 special ballots in the 2021 election were not counted because they arrived after the receipt deadline of 6 p.m. on Election Day. Again, there are no comparable democracies that accept ballots after the election has concluded, up to 30 days after the election. Here, that's what we do in the United States. Now, the CIA fact book, which is actually closing down, but they, on their last reported numbers, they had 33 countries that provided automatic citizenship to anybody that was born within their borders. Virtually every nation that offers unconditional birthright citizenship is located in North or South America. It's a pattern traced back to colonial-era European policies. Australia and New Zealand formerly had unconditional birthright citizenship, but they both shifted to conditional systems in the 1980s and between the 1980s and the 2000s. Today, children born there qualify only if at least one parent is a citizen or permanent resident. In most European, Asian, and African countries, following jus sanguinis principles, Germany and France offer citizenship to children born on their soil only if their parents meet certain residency or legal requirements. Canada is one of the few countries outside the United States that adheres to unconditional birthright citizenship. They have something called the Canada Citizenship Act, and a child born in Canada is granted citizenship even if neither of their parents is a citizen or a permanent resident, provided that neither of those parents are diplomats. The nationality or immigration status of the parents doesn't matter at all. However, there is active political pressure to try to change that, much like we have here in the United States. Some people in the Conservative Party want to just end birthright citizenship altogether, because otherwise, if you're a pregnant woman, you're on vacation in Canada, you end up having to have a baby, well, that child would automatically be a Canadian citizen in addition to whatever country you're actually there from. In Mexico and most Latin American nations, they do also have birthright citizenship with no parental status requirement. Mexico's constitution states that persons born on Mexican territory are natural-born citizens regardless of where their parents come from. Outside of the Americas, this unconditional extension of birthright citizenship to children of undocumented immigrants is rare, pretty much non-existent in developed countries. So hopefully the takeaway here is that our election system is freaking ridiculous. And if it was not for all of these crazy extensions that they've created over the years by allowing ballots to come in for weeks after an election, allowing different sort of schemes to make it more possible for people to cheat, then we wouldn't be in the condition that we are right now. And it wouldn't be so necessary to put these restrictions on our elections. Like I've said on so many occasions, the Save America Act is a good start. But many of those things that I just outlined, the various extensions that allow for mass receipt of ballots and the printing of ballots, it's not going to be addressed. Now, this will bring us closer to it. But there are still additional things that need to be done. And undoubtedly, whatever is done, the states that adhere to those things are probably going to try to push back. So right now, while the debate is ongoing in the Senate on the Save America Act, I haven't shown any clips of it because it's exactly what you would think. The Republicans support it. The Democrats do not. And there really hasn't been much of substance to show. But in this clip, Chuck Schumer essentially admits that illegal aliens are voting in U.S. elections. This is probably the most notable thing to come out of it yet. And unfortunately, I just got to wait till I get past this. Okay.
The core of the bill is handing the voter rolls over to DHS, putting them through an algorithm designed by Moj and
Moj? I think he means Doge.
Musk. That supposedly knocks out illegal immigrants from voting. But the evidence is almost no illegal immigrants vote.
No, that's not true. We've had ample evidence to suggest that there are plenty of illegal aliens that are on the voter rolls. More importantly, there are a lot of dead people that are on the voter rolls. There are a lot of duplicates that are on the voter rolls. And the algorithm that they're going to put them through, we've talked about it before, it's a program with the DHS. It will automatically remove all of those dead people. It will remove illegal aliens. It will remove people who have multiple voter registrations in multiple states. It will clean up our voter rolls, and the Save America Act will also remove the mass mail-in balloting that we currently have that I just went through in that last article. Harmeet Dillon, having had a chance to take a look at the voter rolls in a number of states, she has said that undoubtedly, yes, we have illegal aliens who are on the voter rolls and they are voting. She said the review of 50 to 60 million voter records have revealed that there are thousands of ineligible and outdated registrations, which include illegal aliens.
We've run some records for some states, so I think we've run something between 50 and 60 million voter records so far, and during this president's tenure. And we have found hundreds of thousands of people who shouldn't be on the voter rolls, people who are dead, people who moved, duplicate registrations. We have also found separately non-citizens on the voter rolls, and so now we're doing our due diligence to identify the extent to which they may or may not have voted. And sometimes people are enrolled on the voter rolls. We've just seen some crazy videos from California that show homeless people being used to sign.
Thank you to America Rising Media for rating the channel over on Pilled. Appreciate you guys.
Petitions and register to vote or sign affidavits, could sign ballots for somebody else and fill in. And that's easy when you have a system where there's no voter ID, right, where ballots are being mailed to outdated voting lists. This is not a fiction or a fantasy. Well, Los Angeles County in 2017 agreed with a lawsuit by Judicial Watch that there were over 1 million people in that county alone who should not have been on the voter rolls.
It's really ironic to me that the same people who are demanding that you have the right to vote without proving your citizenship or your identity are the same people who wanted every single one of us to carry around a registration card proving that we had taken an untested and medically ineffective shot for a sickness that was not going to kill you. And they were happy to discriminate against you. They were happy to make sure that you wouldn't get to go out in public. They were happy to strip you of most of your rights if you refused to take a medical procedure that you did not believe you should take, or that would breach your religious ethics or your personal ethics or your deeply held convictions. So once again, the entire argument for them is to ensure that the voter rolls remain clogged with people who are dead, illegal, and otherwise duplicates. Now, John Kennedy has just proven that this entire debate is unnecessary, because through the process of reconciliation, it is possible to pass the Save America Act with 50 Republican votes and then 1 vote from J.D. Vance. All that is required is a simple majority. So the fact that they are forcing this debate, sure, it's great. Make the people who don't want voter ID to go on record and talk about that. That's fine. But if it's possible to just pass it and get it done so that we can have the most common sense, bare bones election security efforts on the books and make sure that it takes place for the 2026 midterms, then what the hell are we doing? AOB22 says, AKA Sugar Tits. Zach and Lisa, appreciate everything you do. I had to make sure my husband was taken off the voter roll after he died. If he wasn't removed, he would start voting Democrat. Yeah, no, absolutely. And, you know, having been a resident of Michigan, you know, my father passed away in 2009. And I've told this story before. As soon as he died, Social Security became aware of the fact that he was no longer alive. They shut down his bank accounts, his credit cards. I had to go through probate on everything. You know, but of course I had to keep paying for the things that that he had if it was required to be that way. But when you die, Social Security doesn't recommend that you be taken off the voter rolls. I mean, it's so odd to me, the certain things that they're perfectly fine handing over your information, like all of my personal identifying information can be given to private non-governmental organizations that are operating voter registration lists, ERIC and other organizations. But for the government who actually gave me my Social Security number and assigns like your legal identity, it's not okay to share that information with them. Again, the whole thing is a farce, okay? These are not serious people. These are people who do not want to relinquish power and access that they've been given over the years because people just assumed that things were going to be done the correct way. So John Kennedy is now pushing for this reconciliation so that we can just ram the Save America Act through. I think that this is great because we've got a lot of business that needs to be taken care of. There are still a lot of Trump appointments who have not even been considered. Looks like Mark Wayne Mullen is going to be the next Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, but of course, DHS is still not funded. This budget reconciliation, though, is a special parliamentary process in the Senate. It allows for the expedited passage of legislation on things regarding spending, revenue, or the debt limit, requiring only a simple majority, 51 votes or 50 plus the vice president, rather than the 60 votes usually needed to overcome that filibuster. The process of reconciliation was created by the Congressional Budget Act of 1974. The process is limited to budget-related matters and cannot be used for general policy changes. Although, under the Byrd rule, the Senator Byrd, he was the KKK senator that was good friends with Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden. Provisions must have a direct impact on the budget. So extraneous items that do not significantly impact spending or revenue are forbidden and can be stripped out. So Senator Kennedy made remarks, and obviously he's pretty frustrated because he believes that the Save America Act should be passed, and the argument over it is completely ridiculous. And of course, we have watched as critical deadlines have come and gone because these people can't seem to get their heads out of their own asses. Let's go ahead and hear his thoughts on this, and then we'll comment. And we just need to get past this commercial real quick. All right.
Serious about passing it, and I think we are, Mr. President. I know you are. We need to try to pass this legislation through reconciliation. Now, you know how reconciliation works, Mr. President. It means we can pass this bill with 50 Republican votes and the vice president to break the tie. That's how we pass the one big, beautiful bill. I would hope to get some of my Democratic friends to support us, but we don't have to have them. That's harder than I describe because, as you know, Mr. President, there are parameters on reconciliation. Anything you propose through reconciliation has to be paid for. We can find the money to pay for it. And anything you pass through reconciliation has to conform with the contours of the Budget Control Act. We call that giving a provision a bird bath. And our parliamentarian decides what passes muster under the Budget Control Act and what doesn't. Now, we've got a lot of smart lawyers in the United States Senate. Every single one of them thinks they're Oliver Wendell Scalia. But we've got a lot of other smart lawyers in America. Here's what I'm getting at. We have yet to try going to these smart lawyers, some in the Senate and some, believe it or not in the Senate, and saying, craft us a SAVE Act that will pass muster under the Budget Control Act and can be blessed by the parliamentarian. And some of my colleagues, those Oliver Wendell Scalia types, they say, Kennedy, you know, that you'll never be able to do that. They don't know. I've been here 10 years. I've seen things pass muster, survive a bird bath that I didn't think had a hope in hell. And I've seen provisions pass the parliamentarians' judgment under a bird bath that I thought, I mean, I've seen them not pass that I thought were slam dunks. You don't know till you try. And we haven't tried. And if this bill is as important as everybody says it is, and I think it is, because we're not just talking about voting, we're talking about the confidence, the trust of the American people in our elections. If this bill is as important as we say it is, we should try it through reconciliation.
So now the only problem with this is that in order to get it to pass reconciliation, it would have to be redrafted. It would have to be put into a different form. I think just based upon the merits of what the SAVE Act would do, it would certainly alleviate some pressure on the budget because it would remove a whole bunch of people from voter rolls. So that's going to release pressure from the printing of federal ballots. Going to save money right there. But of course, in order to do that, you have to start all over again. Now, Anna Paulina Luna, as we've talked about, her idea is to include the SAVE Act with the FISA the FISA renewal. Now, the problem I have with that is that I don't want FISA to be renewed. I think that FISA should probably be rewritten, and we should be looking at something different to spy on our enemies, on people outside of the United States. It is far too easily abused in the current form that it is. Another problem with passing it through reconciliation is that the parliamentarian is not an ally of the administration. She's an ally of Democrats in the Senate. So there is any number of ways to make this happen. And my only fear is that in doing it the way that it is happening right now, there's no possible way that we're going to be able to get to the 60 votes because the Democrats want to strip so many things out of it and essentially make it so that it's not anything close to what it is right now. Let me say thank you very much to Sean Joe for the cookie, Lou Ann V for the shades, John Glock, who just bought a 6-month bronze tier subscription. Thank you so much, John. And then also thank you to Sean Joe for buying that cookie as well. All right, now we've got another couple of updates on the situation that Just the News has been breaking regarding the security of our voter rolls and the intrusion of the Chinese Communist Party and their intelligence and military proxies in the 2020 election. So the question here is whether or not the system that was set up by the Department of Homeland Security to stop these things from happening, did it fail, or was there another way that the Chinese were able to gain access to all of that voter data? Now, this system that the DHS created is called Albert. Now, we do know that this theft of information happened, but so far, the actual mechanism by which it happened has not been declassified, or we don't know if the government even knows exactly how it took place. But undoubtedly, there were breaches. There was interference that was conducted by a foreign country during the 2020 election. Their intention was to swing it to Joe Biden. And we were told, obviously, at the time that the election was the most safest and securest ever, and election fraud didn't happen in the United States of America. We now know undoubtedly that the intelligence community was aware of the intrusions and the theft of data. They hid it from the Trump administration in 2020. There were a number of officials within the Trump administration who also had this hidden from them because it was known that they would pass it on to the president. And we know that the ombudsman for the community, Barry Zalouf, explained that there was seemingly a layer of protection that surrounded China. They completely redefined the words influence and interference when they were speaking about China because they, for some reason, did not want China to be implicated. They, of course, used the original versions of interference and influence when referring to Russia, and they overplayed the actions of Russia. Now, this Albert sensor is an intrusion detection system that was created by the DHS. It was deployed in 2017, and it was used in county elections across the country. This Albert system, if that's what was breached, then that means that it didn't work, and China was able to bypass our security systems. There are, again, some of these reports that are still classified, so we don't know exactly what the mechanism was, and we don't know what it is that we need to secure. But we can tell you with 100% certainty that there was definitely hundreds of thousands of Americans' personal identifying information from these voter rolls that were stolen by China. We know that there were tens of thousands of driver's licenses that were fake, that were shipped in from China, that were set to be handed out to Chinese nationals living in the United States, which of course then would be used to register to vote, get a mail-in ballot, and then vote for Joe Biden. And we do know that some of these driver's licenses were good enough that they could not pass a test to prove that they were fake. In the state of Michigan, you have a barcode on the back of your driver's license. Those barcodes are supposed to be unique and only given by the state. So if you have a Michigan driver's license, that barcode can be scanned, and then it proves its legitimacy as a government-issued document. The barcodes were so good in the state of Michigan that they actually worked. And that was never disclosed to anyone until very recently. If you were using one of these fake driver's licenses in Michigan, they were indistinguishable from the actual government documents that you would receive from the Secretary of State. That is scary. That is very, very scary. And it begs the question whether or not there was someone in the Michigan state government, perhaps working at the Secretary of State, that perhaps provided some information which allowed those barcodes to be created, and to be created good enough that they would be able to get past anybody who was trying to find them out. So we know that China has the ability to hack into our systems. We know that China is savvy enough to make fake ballots. We've shown that from several times over the years. We now know that China is savvy enough to be able to make government-issued documents which appear to be indistinguishable from the actual government-issued documents. We know that they can gain access to these critical voter records. We know that there is obviously a number of different pinch points within our election system which appear to be completely open. Oh, and don't get me started on the electronic voting machines. We definitely know that the electronic voting machines have points of access, whether it's plugging in directly or attaching to them remotely through the modems that were, as testified by Dominion Voting Systems, not present. But of course, when you open up those voting machines, you find that actually they are present. Now, the blue states that will not release these voter rolls undoubtedly, like Michigan, have hundreds of thousands of registered names on there that are dead people or duplicates or illegal aliens or people who have moved out of state. And every single one of those ballots is likely being used. That was another thing. When my father passed away, I had to make sure that he was no longer registered to vote. When I moved out of the state of Michigan, I had to specifically tell them to take my name off of the voter rolls because I was going to be damned if somebody was going to have me voting Democrat in the state where I no longer lived. Now, in 2011, the DHS created this Albert intrusion system. It's part of a larger system called Einstein that protects federal agencies from cyber risks. It's like a black box. It's an unknown server that's installed on a county's election network. It is operated wholly by the Department of Homeland Security. Nobody at the county level really has access to it, but it collects all of the traffic on their election network, and then it transmits it to a non-governmental organization, EIISAC. That's a nonprofit organization in the state of New York. Supposedly, it alerts jurisdictions to malicious traffic on their networks. But just hear me out. If that nonprofit organization is part of the scam designed to allow these intrusions to take place and cheating to happen, then what reason would they have to tell anybody that there's malicious traffic on the networks? 2 weeks before President Trump was sworn in, Jay Johnson, who was the director of DHS at that time, he rushed out and he created that critical infrastructure designation for election equipment, which gave additional oversight to DHS over elections. They needed a command center, so they created a collaboration between the nonprofit Center for Internet Security, the DHS cybersecurity organization CISA, you know them well, the Election Infrastructure Government Council. All three of them are funded by DHS funding, even the ones that are not governmental organizations. And they are also the same organizations that censored citizens who were directly concerned about the security of our elections. Go back to 2020, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. So they worked overtime to expedite the installation of these Albert systems. DHS pressured counties stating that, well, you know, Russia was hacking into our election, and you want to make sure Russia doesn't hack into our election. So we got to install this Albert system. You can't know anything about it, but trust us, we're going to put it in and everything's going to be okay, and we'll know if Russia's trying to hack in. So when they installed it, even though it was working on their systems, there was no dashboard for county level employees to see activity. There were no reports that were given to them. There was no way to observe what Albert was actually doing. It was free to the county, but they did have to sign an agreement which would give CISA unlimited access to their networks, also unlimited access to their hardware configurations, also unlimited access to their security settings, and even more. So again, if the very organizations that are telling the counties that they're going to be safeguarding their elections are actually setting up a system to be able to allow them to continue stealing elections, or maybe even stealing their elections even better than they did before, they're definitely not going to tell anybody about it. So then by September of 2018, DHS had quadrupled Albert deployments, pushing them out gradually throughout President Trump's first administration. The DHS Assistant Secretary for Cybersecurity, Jeanette Manfra, admitted that Albert had detected no intrusions in any state for the year of 2018. Maybe it was successful. Maybe it was doing exactly what it was meant to do, and it was hiding these intrusions. But the thing is, even though Albert was installed on all of these systems, all it does is allegedly detect. It doesn't stop any intrusions as they're happening. It just watches what happens, and then it hopes that somebody else does the work to make sure that it's going to stop it before any more damage occurs. That is a very odd thing to do, and it's a lot of money and a lot of time and a lot of effort to install these things in every county and every state all around the country and have it essentially just be a desktop alert. And where does that alert go? That goes to somebody at CISA or somebody at the DHS. Within a couple of weeks of installing Albert, a county in Washington, Lincoln County, was hit by a ransomware attack. Now, what's interesting is that neither the Albert system nor the Center for Internet Security bothered to tell Lincoln County that they were being hacked, that this intrusion was taking place. Also, Okanogan County, Washington, was also hacked and was also not notified by the Center for Internet Security. And the county commissioners of neighboring Ferry County, they've only got 7,000 citizens, they actually got together and said, you know what, we don't think we should have this anymore. They voted to stop it. They canceled their contract. They removed the Albert devices. There was a media campaign that was put out by NPR, and they attacked the employees of Ferry County. For some reason, NPR was very concerned about Ferry County continuing to use Albert as if it was super important, but it doesn't appear to be doing much of anything at all. It's just a surface level device which allows DHS and the federal government access to these local systems. And I think that the whole thing was it was all designed just to allow them access so that if they needed to fix something, if they needed to hack something, if they needed to adjust vote counts, then likely they probably could. So what's interesting is that yesterday, the New York Times put out an article claiming that President Trump was actually gutting election security. they've always been a big fan of CISA, and apparently they've been whining that the employees of CISA are getting pushed out. They didn't mention anything about CISA being responsible for censoring citizens or going to work with social media companies like X to get people's accounts banned, or, you know, possibly allowing these intrusions by China to take place. As far as I know, they haven't actually said anything about that at all. But what's most troubling to me is that once again, our information and our critical systems are being handed off to private, non-governmental organizations that are most likely funded 100% by tax dollars and public funds. We have this layer of opacity surrounding the system that we're told is 100% safe and secure, while at the same time we see over and over and over again that it's anything but. So I feel like we've reached a point here in our lives where more people than ever before understand that the bullshit that we are told has no basis in reality or fact. The best thing that the federal government could do, in my opinion, is to take control of the election system whole cloth. Just take it over. The states can still choose what date they want to do the elections on, but we need a series of simple, easily implementable rules that govern the process of elections in our country. We need a simple and easy to follow process for the counting of ballots, and we need a unified process to engage in that activity as well. Paper ballots, one day, voter ID, no extensions past the actual election day. And I really wish that they would just make Election Day a federal holiday. Have it be on the same day, give everybody the day off so nobody's got an excuse. If they want to vote, they can vote. If you don't want to vote, then you don't have to. But one thing that is extremely interesting about the China intrusion as well, and it was suggested by Devin Nunes, is that the coinciding of this information being stolen by China seems to coincide with Mark Milley's 2020 conversations with China. If you'll remember, Mark Milley called China and basically told them not to worry about President Trump. It was totally outside of the chain of command, and it was highly unusual. I've done a couple of stories on this over the years because the level of communication that seemed to exist between Mark Milley and China as a nation indicated to me that Mark Milley may have been a Chinese spy. Debweth17 says, "Hey, Zach, it's Space Coast Patriot. Thank you for all you do. Good to see you, Deb. Oh, that's awesome." And then Denise Ann says, "Good logic said that Thune needs to invoke the 2-speech limit, and then that would force them to have a majority vote, not a 60-vote threshold. It's part of the simple rules of the Senate, apparently." Well, I have never heard that before, and I would wonder if many of the people in the Senate, if they had ever heard it before as well. Okay, so I know who Good Logic is, and I've seen a couple of his videos. 2-speech limit, and then that would force them to have a majority vote. Okay, 2-speech limit. All right, so there have been a number of clues that I think we've gotten over the years that Mark Milley may have been acting in some fashion as an agent of China while he was in the Trump administration. And Devin Nunes brings up the fact that the timing of this intrusion by China to gain access to our election information seems to pertain to the same timing of Mark Milley calling China. Was he talking to them about the access they had gained? Was he discussing the specifics of how President Trump was going to be stopped from winning the election lawfully in 2020? Let's take a listen.
Well, the first thing that comes to my mind, John, is if you think back to that time period, you had a almost correlated kind of parallel efforts at that time, and I don't know that they were working together or not, but it was really in that same time frame. So if you remember, this is that time that the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Milley, I believe this was in 2020. Remember, he did that weird thing where he picked up the phone and called somebody over in China that said, don't listen to President Trump. And I'm just wondering if this is if these are related or not. We need to look at what this ombudsman had to say. The committee's everybody needs to kind of take get all the facts first, follow those facts, but then make sure people are held accountable. And I would just look at whether or not these are related, because the timing is quite similar, where you probably had multiple agencies coordinating together to not give the president information.
So certainly, if there was anybody in Trump's administration the first time around that was withholding information from him, generally speaking, Mark Milley was one of them. He was one of many people. I mean, that first administration was so rife with rats and traitors. It's almost unfathomable. And the problem still exists today. I think that the president has a much better set of team members around him. However, despite the best efforts of the team this time around to clear out the bureaucracy, the deep state element of that fourth branch of government, those people still exist. And it's almost like they're worse this time around, because they're smiling even bigger to the president's face. But then behind the scenes, they're acting in an even more ruthless fashion, because they have so much more to lose this time. President Trump has done an incredible amount of work to clean those people out and to suppress the best efforts of the deep state. But despite that, they still hold a tremendous amount of power in Washington, D.C. We see it every day in the judiciary. We see it every day out of the Eastern District of Virginia or the District of Columbia or Illinois. I mean, you've had more injunctions that have been filed and delivered against President Trump combined than you have any of the modern day presidents. It is simply disgusting. And I don't know what the answer is when it comes to these judges. I mean, I feel like that is almost something that it's impossible for us to deal with unless there is some grand action that is taken by the administration. And I feel that we're not quite there yet. The president would not want to do that, because the implications of doing something like that would obviously cause a lot of attention, and not the right kind of attention. Thank you so much to, let's see, Filter Dog, who says, John Solomon reports James Comey is being subpoenaed. Yep, we actually talked about that first thing. That's the document that the IC assessment that was Russians' intent to help Donald Trump win the 2016 election. Okay, so it's based on that intelligence community assessment. Not surprised about that. And there is more than likely a lot more that James Comey is going to be asked about, because not only did he help push that intelligence community assessment, James Comey also suppressed a lot of information, kept it back from the president. We've caught him misclassifying things. We've caught him communicating privately about information that should have remained on government systems. We found James Comey to be misspelling things so that it wouldn't come up in a FOIA request. James Comey has a lot of things that he needs to worry about. Okay, now continuing to the next story, this ties into elections as well. So we know, I reported several months ago that over a year ago, or just about a year ago, Tulsi Gabbard went to Puerto Rico, and the DNI actually seized several voting machines. And this, as far as I know, is the first time Tulsi Gabbard has said this publicly. Now, of course, she's commented on a number of occasions about the DNI's efforts to ensure the security of elections. I believe that behind the scenes, there is a massive investigation that is going on. I'm hoping that at some point in the very near future, we are going to have a massive presentation of evidence that will necessitate these substantial changes to our election system over and above the SAVE Act. But this is the first time that Tulsi Gabbard has said this publicly, and it's highly notable because, of course, she's being asked about this in a session of a committee where she's under oath to answer questions.
Okay. Director, the ODNI has confirmed on the record that your office took custody of voting machines from Puerto Rico last May. I'm not aware of any previous DNI taking similar actions. Did your office promptly notify the committee about taking custody of Puerto Rico's voting machines?
I don't believe we did. However, this was done at the request of the Puerto Rico AUSA attorney.
Ma'am, it's a yes or no question. The answer,
FBI.
as you have acknowledged, is no. You did not inform the committee about the taking of a territory's voting machines.
Now, why would she need to? It's the FBI and it's the U.S. attorney for Puerto Rico that had requested this to be done, because we know that elections were swung using bribery and a whole host of other things. There is currently a DOJ case against Smartmatic, not just the executives that engaged in the bribery to ensure that certain candidates would win or to ensure that certain contracts would be granted. But Smartmatic as a company is actually on the hook, and that is a very different ballgame. So what he's freaking out about is that he and his peers were not notified so they could do something about it. That means that we've got an entire year of deep dive investigation into the programming and the engineering of these voting machines. Of course, that will verify everything that we've been saying for the last 10 years about the insecure nature of these voting machines. And please, Jesus, tell us that there is a large-scale investigation happening currently by the DNI to prove that these systems cannot and must not be used in upcoming elections, because there is simply no way to make them safe.
Is there a specific foreign threat? And I've read the reporting that you were looking for possible foreign threats, but is there a specific foreign threat that drove you to take this action?
There were questions about whether or not there were vulnerabilities that a threat could have taken advantage of, and that was the purpose for their requesting us to look into those vulnerabilities.
Where are those voting machines now?
I believe they are held in a secure facility at ODNI.
Have you or other ODNI officials taken any other state or territory's voting equipment into custody?
Not to my knowledge.
I wish they would have. Now, it's unnecessary because the substance of the programming and the engineering for the machines that would be used in Puerto Rico would be the same in other jurisdictions. All they need to do is prove the insecurities that we have documented in so many different ways over the years still being in use there. And there you go. We've got it. All right. But again, the panic yesterday by Mark Warner about Tulsi Gabbard being present at the election raid not in Maricopa County, in Fulton County. Also, of course, the seizure of election-related materials in Maricopa County, combined with the seizure of this election equipment in Puerto Rico. All of this is coming together to point to what I just was mentioning, the fact that there is a much larger and copious deep dive investigation into the U.S. election system. And the SAVE Act is merely this conversational topper that's going on in the background. I think that perhaps the conversation surrounding that is designed to keep people focused there when the real work, the real important work, is taking place behind the scenes. Now, he didn't ask if there was an ongoing investigation. I really would have liked to hear so that she could say that she couldn't comment. But the other thing that he was so worried about was whether or not any other voting machines had been taken. I think that they believe that they are safe to a degree, but they also know that there is a major problem for them to have to deal with this. It's also worth mentioning that Mark Warner, the man who was questioning Tulsi Gabbard yesterday and getting very impatient with her, it also came out several years ago that he was working right alongside the CIA and MI6 and the London branch to undermine President Trump. Hopefully, Mark Warner gets a subpoena himself, because he was certainly part of that ongoing conspiracy. Now, Senator John Kennedy has also introduced a resolution to withhold senators' pay during shutdowns. Again, I don't know that this is going to go anywhere, because these people have no reason to hold themselves accountable. If this is just a normal resolution, well, then, of course, it's going to require what we would expect from anything else. It's Resolution 526. It sailed through the Senate Rules and Administration Committee with a unanimous vote last year, so it shows that some politicians are interested in it. And despite this overwhelming support and the hypocrisy of Congress, anybody else in any other field is not going to be paid if they don't actually go to work and if they stop business from continuing. It would appear that John Thune is actually the one who is not allowing the legislation to go forth and to actually be voted on, which doesn't surprise me at all because he is in it for himself. Now, we have some additional testimony here from Kash Patel celebrating some of the wins. These next two clips are both from Kash Patel, and it shows the stunning difference between the last administration and the current administration. So one thing that I'm sure everybody here has noticed is that there has been a renewed focus and a very laser sharp focus in this administration on going after child predators. That was not something that you saw either in the Biden administration or the Obama administration or in any administration outside of President Trump, at least that I've been paying attention for a long time, and I've never seen it. In this new administration, the FBI has been responsible for an uptick of nearly 500% in arrests of online predators. They've also located over 6,000 missing children, and they've arrested over 300 child and human traffickers. Take a listen.
Under the Trump administration, this FBI has literally had a historic year. We have 112% increase in violent offenders arrested last year alone, a 20% decrease in homicides, 20% decrease in robberies. We have disrupted 1,800 criminal gangs. That's a 210% increase. We've seized enough fentanyl to kill 178 million Americans. That's a 31% increase. We have gone after the most vulnerable in our society, protecting children, a 490% increase in arrests on those that prey on our children online. We have located, found, and identified 6,200 missing kids. That's a 30% increase. We have dismantled.
Now that's also completely different from the how many did DHS find? There was over 300,000 missing unaccompanied alien minors that came across the border, and they found, I believe, like 2/3 of those children. That is totally separate, and just the fact that anybody is looking for these missing kids, the fact that anybody is protecting these missing kids in and of itself is incredible to me because it just did not track before. Nobody was paying attention. They were perfectly fine. They were feeding off of the victimization of children. They allowed it, and they also perpetrated it. They participated in it, and that doesn't happen now. Yeah, of course, it is still out there, but woe be you if you are an abuser of children, if you're one of those people engaging in this behavior, because this administration comes for you.
And taken down 1,700 child predators. That's a 17% increase. And those that wish to traffic our young American citizens and women, 300 human traffickers have been arrested. That's a 15% increase. And seven of the FBI's top 10 most wanted fugitives in the world have been apprehended in the last 13 months. To put that into perspective, there was 4 in the prior 4 years. So this FBI under President Trump is fully stocked to get after every single fight we have, and these are just some of the statistics. So I thank you for letting me highlight those.
All right. So again, there is a lot of work that was never done before that is currently being done, and I feel that it is absolutely warranted to do a victory lap on that. Now, here is Kash Patel specifically speaking about the handcuffs that were placed on previous FBIs related to Chinese influence here in the United States. Now, a problem that we had been paying attention to and tracking for a long time was the purchase of American farmland and American land that was in the vicinity of military bases. There's only one reason that a foreign government wants to buy land right next to a sensitive military installation. You don't have to be a genius to figure that out. And just like there was a protective cloak around Chinese influence in U.S. elections, there was a protective cloak that was protecting Chinese and CCP interests that was purchasing sensitive American land.
infused funding into our entire program, taking on the CCP. And while we are well versed in the fact that we have our capabilities with folks like CFIUS when it comes to the purchases of land around military bases, that only extends 1 mile under the current law. So the FBI had to get creative. So what we did was directly engage with our state and local partners. And I'll give you 2 examples. A 400-acre farm in the state of Texas was owned by a CCP official, but because he was outside the reach of the CFIUS law, the FBI executed a unlawful possession of firearms, a criminal complaint, and received it. We seized the land in its entirety, and that CCP national is back in mainland China, and we are working to get him back here. In another example, off the coast of Louisiana, we worked with Governor Landry's team on drilling sites off the coast of Louisiana because, again, they were outside the whole of CFIUS in the 1 mile radius. And with the intelligence we were able to provide our state and local authorities, they shut down that CCP drilling center, which we believed was actually used to provide and steal data and intelligence from American lives. So that's just a little bit of an example. On the marijuana grow houses, we have 6 active ongoing investigations in 6 multiple jurisdictions for specifically taking down CCP-affiliated grow houses from Maine to Georgia and across the country.
So it sounds like from your characterization of CFIUS, it's inadequate at this point. Maybe we could do something legislatively here in this body to provide some broader authority to address that challenge.
I would love that.
Okay, great, excellent.
So CFIUS is that organization which is supposed to review business operations that may take place that would be a national security threat to the United States. CFIUS is the board that was supposed to review the purchase of uranium-1 and stop it from taking place, because then obviously it gave Russia control over our strategic uranium reserve. Of course, Hillary Clinton and her cronies made sure that CFIUS gave an okay on that, and obviously there was a financial incentive for the Clintons and the Clinton Foundation. That's why it was allowed to take place. Undoubtedly, I would suggest that CFIUS probably did the exact same thing under the guise of looking past all of the purchase of all of this. So again, we had 400 acres in farmland in Texas that was owned by a government official from the CCP. Again, it was outside the reach of CFIUS, so the FBI executed an unlawful execution of firearms criminal complaint so that they could seize all of that land in its entirety. So no longer in the hands of a CCP government official.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we have in
Louisiana, they had a CCP owned and operated drilling site that was 1 mile outside of CFIUS's ability to do anything about it. So they got creative and provided state and local authorities the intel so that they could shut it down. I've talked ad nauseum about the CCP grow houses that are all over Maine. I know that the FBI and DHS are currently in Maine doing operations, so that's probably going to be taken care of soon. And then, of course, the military bases. That is the biggest concern right there. CFIUS only has jurisdiction to 1 mile outside of the bases, but you've got all of these ultra-sensitive sites. And with the current pace of technology, if you are more than a mile away from a military base, I guarantee you that CCP would still be able to listen in and gather up as much intel as possible. So they purchased up all of that land. Now that land is going to be taken back, and they're in the process of doing that. Keeping America safe extends to a lot more than just sending spies to other countries or making sure that the military is actively defending in hostile nations around the world. Now, James O'Keefe's report on the sale of signatures for ballot initiatives in California ties into a number of different problems in the state of California. James has gotten the attention of the governor's office and the attorney general's office and the secretary of state's office, but to date, nothing has been done. Obviously, it would be U.S. Attorney Bill Asaley who would be in charge of filing charges. I believe that those investigations are happening. That's going to take place. But James has committed to releasing videos proving that this is happening every single day until somebody is indicted and arrested. And you would think that a Democrat senator who perhaps may be benefiting from this or just wants to see the rule of law upheld, somebody like Senator Alex Padilla of California, he's the guy who bum rushed the former secretary of DHS and then got taken down by Secret Service. But he was asked about this outside of Capitol Hill, and rather than comment on it or say that this shouldn't be taking place, he instead chose to run away from the reporters asking the questions.
Senator Padilla, recent undercover reporting in Los Angeles is showing that there is cash for ballot deals being made. I'm with the press. I'm with the press. Well, where's your badge? It's right here. My badge is right here. We have our badges. Cash for ballot measures. Cash for ballot deals. No, Gavin Newsom is now demanding prosecutions for these cash for ballot deals being made in Los Angeles. This is your state of California where this is happening. Why are you opposed to the safeguards in the Save America Act? To get to the next meeting. There's election fraud actively happening in the state of California, and you're opposed to the Save America Act. Can you explain why?
Two different things.
There is election fraud happening in California. Why not be a proponent of the Save America Act to protect American elections?
He made his point very clear just now.
He did not, and the American people still want answers. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Senator
not going to be giving any answers because, again, Alex Padilla likely has benefited from all of these things taking place. Now, we also have a comment from Governor Ron DeSantis after the bit of information that I presented to you that the group of conservative sheriffs down here in Florida set up on the committee by Governor DeSantis seemed to indicate that they wanted Congress to pass some type of amnesty for so-called law-abiding illegal aliens. I was very disappointed by Sheriff Grady Judd and the others who signed on to that. And I would like to play for you the commentary from Governor DeSantis on that, because it doesn't sound like he was too happy about it either. But very quickly before we do that, I have a special message from our friends over here on Rumble. You guys, if you still haven't tried 1775 coffee, I want to let you know you still have an opportunity to do so. Their 1775 starter kits are still available. In those starter kits, you're going to get their bold dark roast that hits nice and hard, their smooth medium roast that goes down a treat, and their Vitality Mushroom coffee that gives you clean energy and laser focus without the crash. It's all made from single origin, small batch, toxin, and mold-free beans. Highest quality you can get. Plus, you're also going to get a couple of free goodies. That includes their gold spoon clip, their very strong frother, and a black 1775 tumbler. It's $170 worth of coffee and gear, and it's all yours for $99. This is for the people who have been watching 1775 blow up on Rumble and wonder if it's actually worth it. It truly is. And to find out for yourself, you just head on over to 1775coffee.com/studio and grab a starter kit before they're gone and get yourself a package of bold beans, clean fuel, in a morning routine that stands for something just like Rumble does. All right. Thank you very much. And let's jump on over to Governor DeSantis.
Where do you stand on that?
And actually, let me turn this up a little bit because the reporter is asking Governor DeSantis where he stands on the comments made by Grady Judd and the other sheriffs who agreed with him.
When it comes to immigration, one size doesn't fit all. Where do you stand on that?
When it comes to immigration, one size doesn't fit all. Obviously, you know how I feel. If you are here in this country illegally, you have committed a crime, you have no right to be here, we have no responsibility to provide you safe harbor or a place to rest your head. You must leave. Right now, the federal government is giving every illegal alien $2,600 and a free ticket home to the country that they came from. And then those people can immediately begin the process of coming to this country legally. They can fill out the paperwork. They can get English lessons. They can do everything that they would need to do to fully integrate into society. There is a one-size-fits-all process for immigration right now, and it's either you do it legally or you're illegal and you get the hell out.
I stand with following Florida's policies, which has said you can't have a situation where Biden can bring in 10 million people and then we're not allowed to remove them back to their home country. This idea that unless you're an axe murderer, you should be able to stay, that is not consistent with our laws, and it's also not good policy. You know, we have different people that are victimized by illegal aliens every day in this country. Not all of them have criminal records at the time. In fact, probably most of them don't. But under some view, it's like, okay, yeah, you come illegally, and then you stay until you commit a really violent crime. That just doesn't work. It's incoherent. It's not what the president ran on. And so to send a letter to him asking him to go back on his campaign policies, I would not advise that to be done. I think the way that we've done it in Florida is a whole host of things, but working with the federal government to help bring more removals to bear when they had limited resources. They have more resources now because they got an influx of money. And so, and you'll be seeing some of that, I think, in play in Florida as well as up across the country. We've got to do that. But then what we've also done in Florida, we've done things to deter people from coming here illegally. You know, Florida has been a top destination for decades for people coming. Well, now what have we done? We've done things like, say, no ID cards, no driver's license for illegal, no, the employment verification.
Bank accounts is another big thing. Now, there's also rumor going around that President Trump is setting up the Department of Treasury to work with all American banks to verify whether or not the account holders at banks are American citizens. I say, if an illegal alien living inside the United States has a bank account, that bank account is up for seizure. You take away the money of the person who is living here illegally, you take away their ability to continue providing for themselves, and they have no choice but to go back to the nation of their origin. That is common sense to me. There is no reason to offer these people any incentive to remain in our state. I'm in Florida, to have them remain in our country. Now, right here, Sheriff Wayne Ivey, who is one of those sheriffs who is on that panel. He's also the one who said, if you are a protester and you block the path of someone's vehicle, it is their right to run you over. He also said, if you try to pull a gun on an officer, we're going to shoot you dead. Wayne Ivey is pretty based. I don't know how he stands on all things, but like Sheriff Grady Judd, he is also one of our constitutional sheriffs, and Wayne Ivey does not agree with Grady Judd and those other sheriffs who said that there should be some special consideration for so-called law-abiding illegal aliens. It's an oxymoron.
I'm tasked with providing law and order and safety to my community. And so he and I are miles apart on this one. I know he was talking about at one point, someone that's been here for a while should be allowed to stay. They're a productive member. I'm 1,000,000% against that. If you came into this country illegally, you need to leave this country. And I'll tell you why, Drew. To me, us allowing people that came here illegally to stay here is a slap in the face to the people that came to this country the right way.
Exactly. That's what I'm always saying. Every single legal immigrant, they sacrificed blood, sweat, and tears. They took the time, the resources, and the effort to come to our country, to abide by our laws, to assimilate, to integrate into our society. And for every illegal alien that is rewarded for breaking our laws and flaunting our rules and regulations, it lessens the sacrifice of those people who came. And it gives every single legal immigrant a bad look in the eyes of Americans, because you're looking around and you see people. How do you know if they're legal or not? I told you guys many times down here in Florida during the Biden administration, I quit going shopping at certain places. I didn't really care to shop at Walmart, but they're open later than other people. So you go to Walmart and you could not walk through the place because it was packed to the gills with people who didn't speak English, people who were clearly delivered here from other nations. I said, you know what? It's not worth it to me. I will make sure that I go shopping early in the morning. So we cannot give some type of benefit to people who have not been arrested yet. They are a walking arrest waiting to happen because they broke the law to enter our nation outside of the boundaries of the way it is prescribed. And if you send that message to any number of them, then in their minds, just as they did during the Biden administration, they say, okay, well, all I got to do is show up and then not get arrested. If I can do it that way, then everything's going to be fine.
the people that followed our rules, that followed our law and order, as a nation. And when we allow people to come here and say, well, you've been here 5 years, you can stay. No, I can't accept that. And so we are miles apart on this one. And Sheriff Judd and I have spoken about it. And excuse me for just a second. I thought I had my calls stopped here, but apparently not.
That's okay. No problem.
I apologize for that.
There's probably people watching and they want to message you. They're like, come on, let's go.
But, Sheriff Judd and I have spoken about this, and he has his position. And that's the great thing about being sheriffs is, we each have our own opinions, our own positions on things. But this is what I tell you, how we are looking at things in Brevard County and how I think we as a nation need to look at it. When you cross the border, the moment you cross the border illegally, you became a criminal, and you made that choice to do that. So when you cross that border illegally, you made yourself a criminal, and it doesn't matter if you've been here 5 minutes, 5 years, or 25 years. You broke the law. There's no statute of limitations on that, and we need to do our process that we're allowed to do through the 287G by working with our local, state, and federal partners on immigration enforcement.
So the one good thing about what Grady Judd said is that there is going to be no change to the way things are happening. But it gives me pause to know that there are any law enforcement officers out there who are considering that perhaps we should not be arresting certain people. Because as soon as you arrest those people, then obviously they become criminals in the eyes of the law. And as I said yesterday, just because somebody hasn't been arrested in the United States of America, just because they haven't been caught committing a crime, doesn't mean that they haven't committed a crime. We've seen it time and time again around this country. You've got soft on crime prosecutors who just dismiss charges because they know that once that illegal alien is on the books as a criminal, then they're more likely to get deported when their name comes up in the lottery. You've also got people who have come here and not been caught committing a crime, but perhaps they have murdered people in their home country. Perhaps they've committed fraud in their home country. Perhaps they have engaged in human trafficking just to get here. Those people, just because they are not on the books as criminals in the United States, are no less criminals all the same. We cannot give them any special consideration. Thank you so much to Deb, to Space Coast Patriot, who says, love my Sheriff Ivey. Yeah, I think he's great. My Sheriff Staley, he is also Sheriff Richard Mack, the founder of CSPOA, the Constitutional Sheriff's Organization. He said that my sheriff is like a 10 on the constitutional scale. All right, now, this is President Trump. This is the story that has come out about President Trump forcing banks to verify citizenship. And again, this is a CNN report, so there's going to be a fair amount of panic. I kind of thought it would be fun to watch that. But again, if people are here illegally and they have bank accounts, seize the money and give it to the American people.
Trump could soon force banks to take part in an immigration crackdown. What I mean by that is sources tell CNN the administration is considering requiring financial institutions to collect and verify their customers' citizenship status, something banks aren't currently required to do. One source says the new policy could come through an executive order. CNN's Matt Egan is following this story for us. So, Matt, what are you learning about how banks are responding to this possibility?
Yeah, well, Omar, this does appear to be part of the Trump administration's aggressive immigration crackdown. Sources tell CNN's Priscilla Alvarez and I that the administration is considering new action that would require banks to check the citizenship status of their customers. Now, this would be something that would actually apply not just on a go-forward basis, but all
the freebies have all been cut out. Yes.
Also to existing customers, which is pretty stunning when you think about just how many customers the banks already have. Now, this action could also require banks to check a different category of documents than what they normally look at, including passports. Now, I do want to stress that.
Now, I'll tell you what, this is where they catch in. This is where they inject the fear mongering. They want to put it into the minds of American citizens that, oh, well, you've got a bank, so now you're going to have to prove your citizenship to a bank. There are plenty of ways that the bank could verify the citizenship of their customers. As I have said before, the exact same system that was created by DHS to verify the citizenship of people on the voter rolls could just as easily be extended to every financial institution so that they could very quickly run those people's information in the exact same way they do a credit check. They're doing your PII on a daily basis and oftentimes without your knowledge, and they could very quickly determine your citizenship status. So if you're opening a bank and you need to verify your citizenship, you go ahead and just bring your birth certificate. You got to do that when you get a driver's license anyways. Or if you've already been given a real ID, that already verifies your citizenship.
Nothing here has been announced or finalized. It's not clear here whether or not this would come in the form of an executive order or some other action. We reached out to the White House, and a spokesperson said that any reporting on policy that hasn't been officially announced is just speculation. But some Republicans do support this. Republican Senator Tom Cotton, he put out a post on X yesterday where he said, "I strongly support President Trump taking action to prevent illegal migrants from accessing our banking system." And he said he sent a letter to Treasury last fall asking for an investigation into this matter and that he plans to introduce legislation.
Okay, so Tom Cotton will be introducing legislation quickly. There have been a number of things that took place just in the last 24 hours dealing with people who are here illegally doing things. There was an act that was just passed in the House. It needs to go to the Senate now for their version. They've already passed their version, but they'll need to reconcile the two bills, which is the Stopping Fraudsters Act or something like that. It will apply immediate deportation to any illegals that have been found to be engaging in any kind of welfare fraud. So think about all of the people in Somalia, all of these Somalians in Minnesota or Ohio or Maine or Maryland or Massachusetts, any of those states where we've already talked about the abuse of these various entitlement programs. It immediately makes those people eligible for deportation. It also applies to other types of fraud and criminal activity. So that's passed. That's something that will be law very shortly. It's a little bit of a ceremonial thing simply because, as I mentioned just a moment ago, based on Farmer's question, all of the entitlement programs have now been locked out for people who are not American citizens. So a lot of that will be dealt with. But we need to ensure that the people who have taken advantage of that system can be kicked out. We don't want them here. There was also another law that was just passed called the Bow Wow Act, which essentially immediately deports anybody who harms an animal that is working for DHS. There was an Egyptian who kicked a DHS dog. It was like a beagle. The beagle was for like drugs sniffing or something like that. And this guy, Egyptian, here illegally, kicked the dog. I think the dog was okay, but real son of a bitch move. So somebody like that will be automatically deportable as well. Anything that we can do to bring down the house on these people, I am fully in support of. Okay, so I can see that maybe my stream is not exactly perfect, but hopefully it's working. Proteus, no, they have still not passed the SAVE Act in the Senate because the discussion is still ongoing. Now, also, this is where we got to talk about Joe Kent. Okay, so this Joe Kent situation is very interesting. I was able to watch some of the interview that he did with Tucker Carlson last night, and he's definitely got some points, some valid points. But first of all, the FBI has now confirmed that they are investigating Joe Kent for allegedly leaking. So, as you know, he resigned his position on Tuesday, stating that because he doesn't believe that the war in Iran should be happening, essentially stating that the only reason the U.S. got involved in the war in Iran was because of pressure from Israel. The president and Marco Rubio at one point seemed to insinuate that Israel was going to attack Iran, and so there was really no choice but to get involved. But there was more to it than simply that. It's also been stated that Joe Kent didn't have access to intelligence briefings related to Iran, so he didn't have the full complement of information. However, the rumors that had emerged at the time of his leaving that he was responsible for leaks now seems to be at least confirmed in terms of an investigative sense. I will say this as well. Simply because there's an investigation doesn't mean that Joe Kent actually did the leaking. If you'll remember, there was Dan Caldwell, who was pushed out of the Pentagon last year because he was suspected of leaking. He was essentially maligned in the press, and they basically said he did this, and this is why he's getting kicked out. But Dan Caldwell was eventually completely exonerated. Dan Caldwell, as far as I could tell, was probably one of the most America First people that was working at the Pentagon. And now, ironically enough, Joe Kent leaves the ODNI, and Dan Caldwell has been employed once again at ODNI. Some of the things that Joe Kent is saying are the types of things that we've said, including that the investigation into Charlie Kirk's death was stopped because he and his team was not allowed to look at possible connections to the government of Israel and the assassination of Charlie Kirk. That, of course, caught my ear. So in this interview with Tucker Carlson, he, in general, was questioning the narratives surrounding not only the assassination of Charlie Kirk, but it seems like the attempted assassinations against President Trump as well. So this was his first interview appearance since leaving the administration, and he was expected to join Mark Levin. Mark Levin had asked at the same time on X whether or not Joe Kent would join him on his program, and Kent replied in the thread, and he said, yeah, let's do it. Well, I saw that Mark Levin had put out another tweet saying, you know, that scumbag Joe Kent never answered me, and so he's not coming on the show. But I'm like, bro, like, he replied to you right there. He ratioed you. Like, I can't believe you didn't see it. But anyways, during this discussion with Tucker, Kent spoke about the circumstances surrounding the alleged assassination of Charlie Kirk. But most importantly, the roadblocks that he faced trying to get to the bottom of it at the National Counterterrorism Center. Kent notably suggested that President Trump may feel like he's under threat due to unanswered questions surrounding the attempts on his life and the assassination of Charlie Kirk. This is another aspect of it that we've spoken about on a number of occasions. The investigation seemed to go nowhere. We got no further information about it. I have suggested, based upon the likelihood of perhaps Ukraine having something to do with at least one of those assassination attempts. Certainly, we can point to Ryan Routh and the national security implications of the way that investigation was shut down, the way a lot of it was sealed, and his noted and open communications with people in Ukraine, his travels to Ukraine, his connections to military, CIA, USAID. If either of those assassination attempts had any connection to Ukraine, I think certainly Routh did. But there definitely appears to be a lot more to the Butler assassination attempt than we've been told. Now, it's entirely possible that POTUS found that information, was given it, and then used it as a leverage point in trying to bring Ukraine to the table and make a peace deal. But it still hasn't happened yet. So I'm not certain. I do think that it's possible that there could still be bad actors within a number of federal agencies who have perhaps obscured or hampered the investigation and perhaps not allowed leads to go in a certain direction. Like, the kid had no silverware in his house. Did you see his dad? His dad was definitely eating on a regular basis. Apparently, he had all of those different phones. He was going to some pretty suspicious locations in Washington, D.C. We never heard anything about any of those things. I think that the Thomas Matthew Crook situation is obscured for a reason because it connects to people who are still powerful. Now, he said, but by no means am I saying, like, you know, the Israelis killed Charlie Kirk. But he wanted to talk about the bizarre timing and circumstances surrounding the shooting at that rally in July in Butler, after the FBI used a confidential human source to arrest that Iranian national, Asif Merchant, who I believe was just found guilty in that foiled assassination plot. Just one day after Merchant gets arrested for that murder for hire scheme on July 12th, you have the Butler assassination attempt on July 13th. There was also talk widely at the time that perhaps there was an assassination attempt that might take place that had something to do with Iran. So you have the arrest that appears to have been a threat that was removed, and then suddenly Thomas Matthew Crooks shows up in an area that should have been much, much better protected. So he also said, we are not allowed to ask, basically, was there any linkage between what took place with Asif Merchant, who was recruited by the Iranians to come to America to recruit proxies to kill President Trump, and Thomas Matthew Crooks? Why would you not be allowed to ask if there was a connection between the two? You've got a known attempted assassination, murder for hire, and then another attempted assassination that happens the next day. We also know that Thomas Matthew Crooks was in communication with accounts overseas. Initially, the FBI, Joe Biden's FBI, said that he had no online presence, but then it turned out that he actually did. We know that his devices were encrypted. We know that he had multiple cell phones. We know that he traveled to businesses or buildings in Washington, D.C. Was there a connection to Iran or to another foreign government? I'd certainly like to know. Crooks, according to the official narrative, is an enigma. We don't know anything about him. They still can't get into his devices, Joe said. If we did get into his devices, maybe there's nothing there. But no more questions are allowed to be asked about Thomas Crooks. The DHS IG is currently being blocked from investigating Butler as well. That is out in the media. That's well known. You investigative journalists found that Crooks did indeed have an online persona, an online footprint, and he was talking to people. So it's like, why aren't we investigating? Why aren't we investigating? That is a very, very good question. He also went on to describe the multiple public breaches of President Trump's security over the last year, before highlighting Charlie Kirk's very public assassination, allegedly by Tyler Robinson, and he said, we're not really even allowed to look into it at all. What's also interesting is that the last time he saw Charlie Kirk before his murder, Joe was going towards the Oval Office. Charlie was coming back, or maybe it was the other way around, and Charlie stopped him and said, Joe, stop us from getting into a war with Iran. He said it very loudly, and then he walked off, and then, that was it. He said, so when one of President Trump's closest advisors, who is vocally advocating for us to not go to war with Iran and for us to rethink at least our relationship with the Israelis, and then he's suddenly publicly assassinated and we're not allowed to ask any questions about it, that's a data point. It's a data point that we need to look into, except we were not allowed to look into that in regards to the assassination. We've been told that this individual, Tyler Robinson, is a lone gunman, and maybe he is, but the investigation that I was a part of at the National Counterterrorism Center was a part of, we were stopped from continuing to investigate. Why would they be stopped from continuing to investigate? I don't care if it's Israel or anybody else. That investigation should have continued, because there's absolutely no way in hell you're going to convince me that Tyler Robinson was it. Now, he said, and the FBI will say that they stopped because they wanted to turn everything over to Utah state authorities. Everything's going to trial. It's very sensitive. But even beyond that, there's still a lot for us to look into that he says he couldn't get into because it's still classified. But there was still linkage for us to investigate that we needed to run down. All I'm saying is that there's unanswered questions. We know the pressure because of the text messages. The text messages, talking about the text messages to Charlie Kirk, those have been made public. Charlie was under a lot of pressure from a lot of pro-Israel donors. And again, we know Charlie was advocating to President Trump against going to war with Iran. And we know that at the end of the 12-day war, at the end of Midnight Hammer, the Israelis were going to come back to us and ask us to go to war again. So we have a lot of data points between Butler, the assassination attempts against President Trump, the breaches of his security, what happened to Charlie Kirk. And he said that his agency was cut off because it was the way bureaucracy works, and that interagency data sharing failures effectively stonewalled the NCTC's investigation of various leads. He further slammed the FBI's investigation of Kirk's assassination for not going far enough to investigate or arrest potential co-conspirators or others with knowledge of Tyler Robinson's plot. Remember all those posts that I showed you guys, which appeared to be furries and trans Tifa types that had seemingly foreknowledge of Charlie Kirk's assassination? They all just deleted their accounts as soon as Charlie Kirk was assassinated. We never learned anything about that stuff either. At this point, I don't know that we're ever going to learn the truth about it, but there are so many different data points. And if I might mention, oh gosh. Hold on. Okay. What happened to my message? Okay. John Cullen was probably the deepest dive that anybody had done into Butler. And then Charlie Kirk gets assassinated, and he's looking into that, and he's now missing. Have you guys heard anything from John Cullen? I can't reach him. I can't get a hold of him. He's completely gone, seems to have left the internet. I think he got closer than just about anybody else did, and now the guy is gone. So, you know, again, it seems like things got shut down. So, he further slammed the FBI's investigation because they didn't go down all of these leads with the people who seemed to have some knowledge about Kirk's assassination ahead of time. He was part of those multiple online communities. As far as I know, nothing happened with that. You had a number of individuals that I believe should have been investigated. I don't even know if they were identified. But the one thing that I'm certain of is that there were others who had knowledge about this. Even if Tyler Robinson is the guy, and I think that perhaps it's possible he wasn't, there would be other people as well. But he said, I just think considering they knew the guy, they knew Charlie was going to be assassinated, there was enough of them that it wasn't just some rando who maybe tags every TPUSA post with that there was enough of them, something was there to be looked into. To me, there's more work to be done, and because there could have been posted from anywhere, that would have been in the purview of the FBI or the NCTC if they're overseas. And to me, I personally did not see any effort being taken to run that down. And he was very bothered by it. There was people publicly posting prior knowledge. I'm here telling you, as someone who's involved in the investigation, there was more stones for us to overturn. And every time we asked, we were blocked. And then they leaked to the New York Times that we had a blow up and we had to throw them out of the room because they're crazy, etc. So it's incredibly frustrating that there's not more, especially considering how pivotal Charlie was to the MAGA movement and to President Trump, that there hasn't been a more concerted effort to find the truth and to find justice. Now, to be clear, Joe is not suggesting that President Trump is trying to cover this up in any way. There are various agencies that are supposed to be running this stuff down that are, several layers below the president. He says, I pray there is. I hope this helps. I know we know you, and I will probably take some flack for it. Tucker chimed in and said, I don't know, and I doubt I'll be, but at a certain, but I've really tried not to say anything because I don't know the answers, but I want them to be found because I believe in justice and I love Charlie, but I think everything you have said may be dismissed as crazy or evil. Tell me how I know. With reference to the words you've just spoken, I don't see how someone with a could level a legitimate attack against you. It won't stop them. Let me see. So, okay. So Deb says they've already spied on our bank accounts. They shut down Trump's accounts in 2020. Oh, that's the thing. The bank knows everything that you do in your bank account. And I guess and with regards to Trump's accounts, all they had to do was just know who Trump was and then shut it down. Thank you for that, Deb. And number one Indiana dad says, Dan Bongino says he's lying, refused to attend a briefing, data points without linkages or receipts. I guess I would want to know specifically what he's lying about. And here's the thing. If Joe was not privy to everything that was going on, perhaps his perception of not being allowed to go down certain investigative leads were because they were looking at other people were looking at it. But at the end of the day, regardless of any one specific thing that Joe Kent might have said, I think that he's asking the exact same questions that we were asking in the follow-up to Charlie Kirk's murder. I do believe that there were many different investigative leads that didn't seem to be investigated, or certainly we were not told about anybody being exonerated. There were so many different aspects to the death of Charlie Kirk that just seemed to go away. And then also Chewy says, Zach, check your email. I've resent the email to you 3 or 4 times just to bump it to the top of your inbox because I'm sure you get tons of email. Your neighbor in Ormond Beach, Matt Grody. Matt. Okay, cool. Let me do a refresh. Okay, I see it, dude. I see it. All right. Hold on. Odie says, come on, Zach, he's deflecting. He was behind Signalgate and other leaked info. So we know that he is being accused, but I don't know about him being behind Signalgate. And here's the thing. I mean, all I'm doing is presenting the information that he said in this interview, and I'm not even saying that I know him to be telling the truth. I don't know that he was behind Signalgate. I know he was part of the message that was part of Signalgate, but there hasn't been anything presented to me to show that Joe Kent was responsible for Signalgate. I believed at the time that it was, the guy who lost his job and who got kicked into the UN. It seemed very possible that he was responsible for Signalgate. Either way, the only way that we get to some type of truth is through an investigation and some public finding being made. Just because Joe Kent has been accused publicly of leaking is not enough for me to say that he actually leaked. We don't know that to be the case. Just like Dan Caldwell was accused of leaking, but then he was quietly exonerated, and now he's back at the ODNI. So all of this is up in the air, but I think all of it needs to be looked at. And I also still think that we need more answers on Butler and every other security lapse that surrounded the attempted attacks on President Trump and, of course, the death of Charlie Kirk. So we'll continue to track it. Now, President Trump had a meeting with the Japanese Prime Minister earlier today, and she is 100% behind President Trump and his efforts. She said that President Trump is essentially the only person who can achieve peace across the entire world, and I absolutely agree with her. And for whatever reason, it's not.
Hit.
There we go.
Because of this development.
でも私は、世界の、繁栄とそして、平和に、貢献できる、世界中に、平和と繁栄をもたらせるのはドナルドだけだと思っています。
But even against that backdrop, I firmly believe that it is only you, Donald, who can achieve peace across the world.
そのために私は、諸外国に働きかけて、しっかりと応援をしたいと思っています。
And to do so, I am ready to reach out to many of the partners in the international community to achieve our objective together.
今日私はそれを伝えに来ました。
So today I came here at the White House to directly convey this message to you.
そしてイランに関してはもう核兵器の開発、これは許されてはならないことですから日本も働きかけをしてきました。
And speaking of the situation in which hit.
All right. Now, she is also there discussing the investments that Japan is going to be making into the United States. Need to say thank you very much to Deb, who says we will never know the truth about anything, including 9/11. It's just up to us to have common sense. I don't know if anyone would be held accountable. The swamp is deep. I think that it's unlikely that every single person will be held accountable, but I am always holding out hope that as many people as possible will. BruderMart71 says, love the show, brother. Thank you for all you do. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. And Sabrado says, Dan goes over it with a fine-tooth comb. He knows. He says he is going to be in deep doo-doo. And if he will be, then so be it, because that's what he deserves. If he is a person who was leaking to the press, and believe me, when I went over this yesterday, I presented the likely reasons why he would be somebody who would, considering his relationship with his wife, then he deserves to have charges pressed and filed against him, and he deserves to go to prison. So we'll find out as things shake out. Now, Mike Waltz was the guy who I was trying to remember earlier. He was the one who had the direct connection to that Atlantic reporter. So if you want to show me something that says that it was Joe Kent who was responsible for Signalgate, by all means, send it to my email, but I haven't seen it. All right, now, there is a report, I don't know how realistic it is, but allegedly Trump is considering the deployment of thousands of ground troops along the Straits of Hormuz. This would be to ensure that traffic continues through there. Lindsey Graham is trying to get Trump to take Karg Island. If this happens, it may be out of necessity to protect Iranian national interests, because President Trump was pretty pissed about Israel hitting the oil fields and the natural gas fields. What he wants is for the war to end and then for Iran's new government to immediately begin to continue producing oil. And if Israel takes out all of their energy production capacity, it's going to set the nation back decades, because they're going to have to rebuild all of that infrastructure, and they're not going to have any source of income in the meantime. So I don't know how likely this is, but if it happens, I think it would be because of that. Now, there was another attack that I just mentioned on those natural gas fields, and President Trump made the unprecedented move of going on Truth Social and essentially telling the world, and Iran specifically, that we had nothing to do with Iran hitting these things. This is another one of those points where the interests of Israel do not align with the interests of the United States. And considering the idea that we're supposed to be partners here, then it obviously would have been really nice for Israel to mention something about this. But of course, they're in it for their own reasons, and what the United States want does not necessarily align with what Israel wants. So President Trump announced yesterday on Truth Social that Israel had hit a major facility known as the South Pars gas field in Iran, which prompted Iran to launch retaliatory attacks against Qatar's liquid natural gas facility at Ras Laffan Industrial City. We have a security protection arrangement with Qatar, which obviously it necessitates certain responses when attacks are made on our partner countries. Qatari officials said Iran's attacks caused extensive damage to the area of the world's largest liquefied natural gas export facility. If this was to be destroyed, then it would obviously create major disruptions throughout the entire world. They said that this move is a dangerous escalation, a flagrant violation of state sovereignty, and a direct threat to their national security and regional stability. Obviously, completely unwarranted, because Qatar had nothing to do with the decision that was made by Israel. So President Trump put out a statement that said that Israel launched this attack and nobody else was involved. So the reply from President Trump is right here. He said, Israel, out of anger for what has taken place in the Middle East, has violently lashed out at a major facility known as South Pars gas field in Iran. A relatively small section of the whole has been hit, and the United States knew nothing about this particular attack. And the country of Qatar was in no way, shape, or form involved with it, nor did it have any idea that it was going to happen. Unfortunately, Iran did not know this, or any of the pertinent facts pertaining to the South Pars attack, and unjustifiably and unfairly attacked a portion of Qatar's LNG gas facility. No more attacks will be made by Israel. He's putting Israel on notice here, pertaining to this extremely important and valuable South Pars field, unless Iran unwisely decides to attack a very innocent, in this case, Qatar. He's also telling Iran to stop what you're doing and do not attack Qatar, in which instance the United States of America, with or without the help or consent of Israel, will massively blow up the entirety of the South Pars gas field at an amount of strength and power that Iran has never seen or witnessed before. I do not want to authorize this level of violence and destruction because of the long-term implications it will have on the future of Iran. But if Qatar's LNG is attacked again, I will not hesitate to do so. Thank you for your attention to this matter, President Donald Trump. Let's see. Hey, Would You Blow Me says, how come YouTube still allows you to watch the Charlie Kirk assassination, but you can't watch a deer get shot? Because it's left wing and you know it. We need a laugh. Play and repeat. Okay, I'll play that at the end of the show. All right, so you'll notice that President Trump does not warn Iran to not attack Israel in retaliation, because obviously it was Israel that did this. Israel in by operating outside of the chains of communication and looping in anybody else on what they're planning to do is pushing for a dangerous escalation in Iran. They just want Iran to be completely wiped off the map. They don't care that the people of Iran may have nothing to do with the Islamic Revolutionary Government. And this is obviously not what President Trump in the United States wants. So I tend to think that the American troops that may get sent there may have something to do with that. Now, Qatar and Turkey have also responded. Qatar and Turkey also have a security agreement. They put out a joint statement essentially blaming Israel for the Islamic regime attacks on the Gulf states, and they definitely did not blame the U.S. So just backing up the idea that the U.S. wasn't involved. So Israel needs to check themselves before they wreck themselves, and President Trump wants to make sure that they're aware of it. Deb says, after Signalgate, Trump moved Waltz to ambassador at the UN. Yes. That is correct. All right, so Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent also commented on the situation in Iran, and he said that we're starting to see defections. We know where everybody's bank accounts are, and we're noticing that money is starting to move. And once we identify their bank accounts, we are freezing them and we are holding them. And we are also getting requests for people to defect. Obviously, the more people that defect from the Islamic government, the more likely it is we're going to get to a swift conclusion of this without getting bogged down in a forever war, which is what Joe Kent's warnings were about.
This is nonsense, Maria. For the regime, we're back to the stuff of Baghdad Bob here. The regime is in.
The grumpy old man, Bibi, just did another video, so I don't think the dude's anywhere close to dying.
Collapse. And the people are starting to turn against them. We're starting to see defections. At Treasury, we now know where the Iranian leadership bank accounts are, and those are being frozen. And we will hold them and see who comes forward in terms of defections. But
okay, so obviously shutting down the money is a major incentive to getting people to comply. Now, also, just thinking about the pressure that this conflict is having on global energy supplies, Scott Bessent says that we're actually just going to use the Iranian oil that we've got access to. So there's all of the oil is sanctioned, which means that Iran is not allowed to sell it anywhere. They're not able to get anything out. That's slowly going to dwindle their cash reserves. And we have access to oil that had already gone out, but has not been allowed to be delivered. So we're just going to take their oil and we're going to sell it.
Maria, to be clear, this is a coordinated effort. We had a break the glass across the administration and at Treasury. We unsanctioned Russian oil. We knew that there were about 130 million barrels on the water, and we created supply that is beyond the Straits of Hormuz. So we anticipated this. We knew that there could be a temporary, and I want to emphasize temporary, choke point there, and there was 130 million barrels of floating storage. In the coming days, we may unsanction the Iranian oil that's on the water. It's about 140 million barrels. So depending on how you count it, that's 10 days to 2 weeks of supply that the Iranians had been pushing out. That would have all gone to China. In essence, we will be using the Iranian barrels against the Iranians to keep the price down for the next 10 or 14 days.
And obviously, the price of gas at the pump is something that a lot of people are very concerned about. Now, I just want to go over this real quick. James O'Keefe said that when he and his team were in L.A. and they were exposing those fraud centers that were paying for signatures, there were people who were employees of NGOs who were pretending to be LAPD officers. This is obviously against the law, and it's something that the people at the U.S. Attorney's Office in L.A. might want to take a look at.
And an employee of the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority records not the fraud, but the people exposing it.
That you okay? Why are you filming? Why are you filming us?
Who are you?
Who are you?
Who are you?
In that same vein, rather than exposing the fraud, as we showed yesterday, Gavin Newsom was trying to call Nick a pedophile for checking in on the validity of these daycare centers. And hold on, I got to let the dogs out, so I'm going to let this play real quick.
Is an enemy to the people of California. He's literally working to support the fraudsters. Meanwhile, he could be working to expose the fraud. I mean, how stupid do you have to be to say, okay, let's go after the guy who's exposing the fraud. Let's not go after the fraudsters. That is what he's doing, what he's actively doing each and every single day when he makes out these statements, and all he does is blame the people who are showing the fraud. Why doesn't he say, hey, Nick, great video. How can we help?
Right. That's what I would say. Was wow, great video. How did you find this? Where did you go, and where are you going next so we can find somebody to go with you? Don't you think that would be a common response?
Exactly, because these tax dollars don't say right or left on them. They don't say Republican or Democrat.
Right.
Each tax dollar is a dollar for the American people, and when they go in and steal these dollars from us, they're not robbing just the liberal Democrat in California. They're robbing everyone.
Yeah. So, of course, the reason California state government is not following up on these leads is because much in the same way the politicians are benefiting off of the signatures they're getting on these ballot initiatives, they're also benefiting from every dollar of fraud that goes into the pockets of people who may be voters or who may help them to ballot harvest and ensure their next election. Now, I'm going to end with this. As I've told you on a number of occasions, Ilhan Omar changed her name when she came here because her father was a military general working in the government of the ruling junta that was authoritarian in Somalia. They were kicked out of the country not because they were under political persecution, but because they were under the persecution of the citizens of Somalia. And the Republic of Somaliland has released the information proving that Ilhan Omar's real last name is Elmi. You have her marriage license application right here from 2009, where Nur Saeed Ahmed Elmi, I believe this is her brother, and then you also have Ilhan Abdullah Omar's marriage license to her brother, proving that she married her brother. So Elmi is her real last name. Omar was the fake name that they used. Because her brother was still using the old last name, it didn't immediately register that these people were brother and sister. So expose it all. All right, before we go through the final thank yous, I have one final message from our friends over here on Rumble. You guys, as you know, banks are not your friends. They can cancel your accounts. They can freeze your cards. They can decide what you're allowed to buy, what you're allowed to say, who you're allowed to support. Big banks and financial institutions have total control over your lives, and they use it. This is why financial independence matters right now more than ever. So introducing the Rumble Wallet, a wallet built for real freedom, because with the Rumble Wallet, you control your money, not a bank, not a government, not a tech company. You can buy digital assets like Tether, Tether Gold, and Bitcoin all in one place. No permission, no middlemen, no cancel button. And when you want to support creators you actually believe in, you can use the Rumble Wallet app to directly tip content creators securely, instantly, and without interference. It's not a credit line they can shut off. It's your wallet, and it's permanent to protect for the future and for your family. So when the system fails, when institutions turn on their own people, financial sovereignty is the difference between security and vulnerability. And the Rumble Wallet isn't about politics. It's about freedom, ownership, and protecting what's yours. So take control today by downloading the Rumble Wallet and step away from the big banks for good. You'll get true ownership, true protection, and true financial freedom. All right, and final thank yous over here. First of all, Deb says, also remember Mike Waltz left the congressional seat open for Randy Fine, who we voted for state legislature. I agree with Fine. Get all Islamists out of America. I don't disagree with that at all, but I do think that it's still possible for Mike Waltz to have screwed up and to have been pushed out of his position for a reason. Also, thank you to Filter Dog, who says FBI investigation found Kent leaked details from classified servers to a member of the media and had other leaks to Tucker. That's why the interview was ready to go when he quit. So again, I'm just waiting for the official results of the investigation, not reports to other members of the media. Sean Joe, thank you for the cookie. No thanks, Joe, says, thank you, Lisa and Zach. You're always right on top of reporting, and I'm always listening. I'm preparing dinner. Thanks for keeping me properly informed. God bless. Be safe. Thank you very much Good Dog 45, thank you for the can. Sean Joe, thank you for the cookie. And thank you for one more cookie. All right, you guys, I got to go. The dogs are barking at the door. Good luck. God bless. And I will see you guys tomorrow at 5 p.m. right here on Red Pill News Live. Peace. Oh, Big Lemon 77, thank you for that tip via Rumble Wallet.